All right. All right, the day has come. But the day has come, everyone. Donald Trump has been indicted again for his role in January 6th. And we're going to get into that, you guys. Check into the stream. Check into the stream. We're going to pull it all up. We're going to pull everything on up. Got Donald Trump's indictment coming in. Check in, you guys. Drop a comment where you're tuned in from, what city, what state, where in the world you're watching from. So, to start off the bat, we also have a press conference coming in from Jack Smith, which I'm not sure. I'm not sure where that is going to be at, but we're going to find it. Pineville, Missouri. Pineville, Missouri. Good to have you. So, former President Donald Trump has been indicted by the grand jury convened by special counsel Jack Smith to investigate Trump and his allies' attempts to overturn the 2020 election. Trump has been charged with four counts: conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to obstruct the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. Conspiracy to impede the January 6th congressional proceeding, a conspiracy against the right to vote and to have that vote counted, an obstruction of, an attempt to obstruct and impede the certification of the electoral vote. Put him in jail. Put him in freaking jail immediately. If it wasn't enough that he had taken illegal documents, or had taken the most top secret of documents from the SCIF and from secret places that you shouldn't have it, and he has it in his house, and he's got foreign enemies reading it and shit, and putting the CIA, putting the federal agents at risk, getting them killed, revealing battle plans. If that wasn't enough, I mean, we were waiting for this one. This is the one that everyone was waiting for, about the lies about January 6th. This is nothing to do, Joshua Cope. This has nothing to do with the previous indictment, and you're still waiting on that. I told you guys there was multiple indictments for Donald Trump. Multiple. The one you're coping about, you said, what about the Biden and the car and that's from the other indictment. This is a new indictment. New indictment has released. Okay? Special counsel has charged him with 4 counts. We're waiting for further here on Jack Smith. Let me try to find that. We're supposed to have a press conference here.
Just talking
ish. Know him. Waiting for a link. CNN confirms that Donald Trump is the person who just got indicted by special counsel Jack Smith's federal grand jury for trying to steal Biden's victory. Conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, conspiracy against rights. It's on C-SPAN. It's an odd place to have it. Special counsel Jack Smith delivering a statement, huh? No ads. Skip.
But given the resilience of the economy recently, they are no longer forecasting.
We're waiting for it still.
I just want to note that that our staff produces its own forecast, which is independent of the forecast that we, as FOMC participants, produce. Having an independent staff forecast, as well as the individual participant forecast, is really a strength of our process. There's just a lot of, I think, constructive diversity of opinion that helps us make, informs our deliberations, helps us make, I hope, better decisions.
And is the reason for optimism that inflation has come down?
We're waiting for Jack Smith. So this isn't it yet. We're still waiting. Jack Smith isn't talking yet, so we're waiting for that. Who's sad? Who thinks that this is a conspiracy against Donald Trump? Who is upset about this? That Donald Trump is facing accountability? I want to hear, I mean, honestly. Most of y'all know what the fuck is up here with Donald Trump and his lies about the election, that it was stolen, and there's fraud and all this bullshit, all this nonsense. So this is a statement from Donald Trump, directly from him. There is nothing more than the latest corrupt chapter in the continued pathetic attempt by the Biden crime family and their weaponized Department of Justice to interfere with the 2024 presidential election, in which President Trump is the undisputed frontrunner and leading by substantial margins. But why did they wait 2.5 years to bring these fake charges right in the middle of President Trump's, again, he's writing in the third person, winning campaign for 2024? Why was it announced the day after the big crooked Joe Biden scandal broke out from the halls of Congress? The answer is election interference, right? It's not the fact that he lied, and this is just accountability for lying about the 2020 election. They had fake electors, you guys, fake people saying that literally lied, saying that that ballots were missing and shit. They weren't even telling the truth, and that's all coming out right now too. Well, all this is going. We're waiting for Special Counsel Jack Smith still. Hold on. Let me do where's that one? You don't agree with all? What do you mean you don't agree? Just saying the statement, I don't agree with any of this, means nothing. What's your position? Why do you not agree with it? Why? Why do you not agree with Donald Trump being held accountable for his literal crimes while he was president of the United States? And yes, lying about the election being stolen and sending his mob to the Capitol to riot and get one of them killed over it and all this dumb shit is crimes. And you're facing accountability for it. And also taking the documents out of the skiff and other places, having it in his bathroom. That's a whole other indictment. That's a whole other deal he is going down. So what is there that you don't agree with? You don't agree with Nutella? He is literally a traitor. You watched January 6th live? It was so boring and mundane. What the fuck? You get put in timeout for that. You get put timeout for that. It was boring and mundane. We covered January 6th here live. We covered it live. It was definitely not boring and mundane. That's cope. Absolute cope right there. Now I completely forgot what I was going to look up. Oh, the electors. Oops. Trump electors. There you go. Trump's fake electors in Pennsylvania are going to avoid the prosecution, though. So he really had this shit going. 16 people in Michigan who served as so-called fake electors for Donald Trump are now facing state-level forgery charges. But similar prosecution appears unlikely here in Pennsylvania, as the investigation into an alleged plot to overturn the 2020 election ramps up. The Keystone State was one of 7 won by President Joe Biden, where groups of people gathered to submit votes for Trump instead. The plan to organize those electors is part of a federal investigation led by Special Counsel Jack Smith, who appears to be nearing criminal charges. Prosecutors in Arizona and Georgia, 2 states with false electors, here are also investigating the plan. So the only fake electors and fake shit was coming from Donald Trump himself. You sound like, okay, you can get put in timeout too. You can cry about it. I don't give a shit. Okay. Waiting for Special Counsel Jack Smith. We're gonna have a lot of cope on the stream today. A lot of people that are for Ukraine. They're supporting Ukraine, but for some reason they are still Donald Trump fans, and that's okay. You can cope and seethe. You can cope and seethe, and welcome to reality. It's okay though. You'll be all right. All right. Continued statement from Donald Trump. The answer is election interference, he says. So we just went over the actual election interference and the actual election, the people that he had set up. We can go through a few other articles of it, but he had fake electors out there counting votes to try to switch them over. All right. The lawlessness of these persecutions of President Trump and his supporters is reminiscent of Nazi Germany in the 1930s, the former Soviet Union, and other authoritarian dictatorial regimes. President Trump has always followed the law and the Constitution with advice from many highly accomplished lawyers. These un-American witch hunts which will fail, and President Trump will be reelected to the White House so he can save our country from the abuse, incompetence, and corruption that is running through the veins of our country at levels never seen before. 3 years ago, we had strong borders, energy independence, no inflation, a great economy. Today, we are a nation of decline, which is that's all for people in the bubble. That's all words and rhetoric for people in the conservative bubble land still that don't know the reality of anything. Which I don't get it. How can you support Ukraine and then want to support this dude who's basically like would be a Russian politician? He's the same type of person. He withheld aid from Ukraine to get information and dirt on Hunter Biden. So I don't. It's like it's your fault. It's your fault for being MAGA, and so you can support Ukraine still. It's great, but you know you're gonna get pushback. There is no like, oh, we're all together in this. Let's support Donald Trump. It's not gonna happen. Okay, he's a fucking traitor, and he's gotten people killed for his misuse of documents. Putting them. Oh, here we go. He's a traitor, and he needs to face justice and go to prison. All right, here we go. See what Jack Smith's got. How am I? I'm doing well. It's 420 day today in Minnesota. Doing fantastic. We're waiting for special counsel Jack Smith's statement. Why is Biden a traitor? What did Biden do that makes him a traitor? Stop throwing whataboutisms out there just because, like, this isn't Fox News land. Oh, Michael Doc Skirkanich. Cope. Nope, I voted third party in the 2020 election, but the way it's looking now, oof. Not a single GOP Republican is looking anything remotely like they want to be leading a democracy. What about the aliens? Waiting for special counsel Jack Smith's statement regarding the latest indictment for Donald Trump. Yeah, what about D's to every what about from MAGA?
Good evening.
Here we go.
Today, an indictment was unsealed,
Nice.
charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full.
Okay, where is it? Well, we'll do that after
The
this.
attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021 was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. The men and women of law enforcement who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th are heroes.
MAGA was not back to blue that day.
The very best of us. They did not just defend a building or the people sheltering in it. They put their lives on the line to defend who we are as a country and as a people. They defended the very institutions and principles that define the United States. Since the attack on our Capitol, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. This case is brought consistent with that commitment, and our investigation of other individuals continues. In this case, my office will seek a speedy trial so that our evidence can be tested in court and judged by a jury of citizens. In the meantime, I must emphasize that the indictment is only an allegation and that the defendant must be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. I would like to thank the members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation who are working on this investigation with my office, as well as the many career prosecutors and law enforcement agents from around the country who have worked on previous January 6th investigations. These women and men are public servants of the very highest order, and it is a privilege to work alongside them. Thank you.
Why didn't you charge any of the other co-conspirators, Mr. Smith?
Do you worry this gives that?
No questions.
Can you bring any other charges against more individuals?
No questions. There's
And hearing live from Special Counsel Jack Smith announcing an indictment against former President Donald Trump in attempts to overturn the 2020 election. The Trump campaign issuing a statement that reads, "This is nothing more than the latest corrupt chapter in the continued pathetic attempt by the Biden crime family and their weaponized Department of Justice to interfere with the 2024 presidential election, in which President Trump is the undisputed frontrunner and leading by substantial margins." If you missed the special counsel's statement, you can watch it online at cspan.org. And we'll get your reaction on tomorrow's Washington Journal here on C-SPAN starting at 7 a.m. Eastern.
indicted.
And more
Damn.
from the Truman Civil
Damn,
Rights
MAGA.
Program with current Air Force Chief of Staff
No,
General
thank you.
Charles C.Q. Brown.
All right. Do you agree with the charges against Donald Trump? What do we guys at say? 80%? 89% say yes. 11% say no. All right. Where is the full indictment now? We got to go through the whole thing. Where is that? We could rewatch it too in case you missed it. So let's use that. Trump indictment. Read the full text. There it is. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. PDF is, yep, we love PDFs. Love PDFs. All right, here we go. More Trump indictment reading. Number 2. Here we go. Dial in. Should we spark up? So we should have a safety meeting before this one. We read the other one. This is the full January 6th indictment. Yep, the whole thing. The whole thing and nothing but the whole thing. We're going to go through it, but I'm going to spark up. Because it's legal in Minnesota. The undisputed, most diabolical villain in the world. Donald Trump. The whole shite show. No, spark one up, you guys. Spark one up. And I used to be a Republican. I was a conservative. And honestly, I mean, I still feel that having conservatives is necessary in terms of their views of smaller, it's supposed to be their views of smaller government, but I mean, I feel like conservatives have lost their way with this Donald Trump thing. At least the MAGA ones have. I don't know. I feel like a lot of conservatives are politically lost right now. They don't really know who they want to vote for or what the hell is going on. But the MAGA crowd, though, they're still in the cult. They're still in the cult. And it's sad. Because it's too easy just to be like, yeah, this is BS. And then, because we in America get to vote for a new president every 4 years. So I don't get it. I don't know. You used to be a Mercado Media subscriber. Well, I'm glad that you're gone then, fuck boy. Here we go. We're gonna play the Russian music. Okay, in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, indictment time. Another one. So we went through the entire documents indictment, right? We had boxes on Mar-a-Lago. So we got to go through the January 6th indictment. The whole thing. All of it. Every single step. Also, happy legalization day. Smoking on some Girl Scout cookies. All right. Plus, we have Ukraine war news to go through tonight. We have Ukraine war news to go through as well tonight. That'll be great. So, the grand jury charges that at all times material to this indictment on or about the dates and approximate times stated below introduction. The defendant, Donald J. Trump, was the 45th president of the United States and a candidate for re-election. Defendant lost the 2020 presidential election. Despite having lost, the defendant was determined to remain in power. So for more than 2 months following the election on November 3rd of 2020, the defendant spread lies that had been an outcome determinative fraud in the election that he had actually won. These claims were false, and the defendant knew that they were false, but the defendant repeated and widely disseminated them anyway. To make his knowingly false claims appear legitimate, create an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger, and erode public faith in the administration of the election. The defendant had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been an outcome determinative of fraud during the election and that he had won. He also was entitled to formally challenge the results of the election through lawful and appropriate means, such as seeking recounts or audits of the popular vote in states or filing lawsuits challenging ballots and procedures. Indeed, in many cases, the defendant did pursue these methods of contesting the election results. His efforts to change the outcome in any state through recounts, audits, or legal challenges were uniformly unsuccessful. Shortly after Election Day, the defendant also pursued unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the election results. In doing so, the defendant perpetrated 3 criminal conspiracies. 1. Conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair and defeat a lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government in violation of 18 U.S.C. subsection 371. A conspiracy to corruptly obstruct and impede the January 6th congressional proceeding at which the collected results of the presidential election are counted and certified, the certification proceeding in violation of 18 U.S.C. A conspiracy against the right to vote and have one's vote counted in a violation of 18 U.S.C. Each of these conspiracies, which is built on the widespread mistrust of the defendant, was creating through pervasive and destabilizing lies about election fraud, targeted a bedrock function of the United States federal government and the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. Hit the like button, you guys. Subscribe to the channel. Check into the stream. We're going through Trump indictment, the whole thing. Count 1. Conspiracy to defraud the United States. The allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 4 of this indictment are realigned and fully incorporated here by reference. The conspiracy from on or about November 14th of 2020 through on or about January 20th of 2021 in the District of Columbia and elsewhere, the defendant, Donald J. Trump, did knowingly combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with co-conspirators, known and unknown to the grand jury, to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government. Purpose of the conspiracy. The purpose of the conspiracy was to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential election by using knowingly false claims of election fraud to obstruct the federal government by which those results are collected, counted, and certified. The defendant's co-conspirators. The defendant enlisted co-conspirators to assist him in his criminal efforts to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential election and retain power. Among these were co-conspirator 1, an attorney who was willing to spread knowingly false claims and pursue strategies of that defendant's 2020 re-election campaign that attorneys would not do. Co-conspirator number 2, an attorney who devised and attempted to implement a strategy to leverage the vice president's ceremonial role overseeing the certification, proceeding to obstruct the certification of the presidential election. Co-conspirator number 3, an attorney whose unfounded claims of election fraud the defendant privately acknowledged to others sounded crazy. So these are probably like Rudy Giuliani and shit then, huh? Like his little inner circle that he had that all sounded stupid during the January. Listen, and it's MAGA's own dumbass fault for listening to Fox News and making fun of the January 6th hearings, pretending like they didn't mean anything. Yeah, it's your all dumbass fault for falling for it. Yeah, it meant a lot. And the co-conspirators and people that Trump worked with to try to disseminate this bullshit was all shown in the January 6th hearings. Co-conspirator number 4, a Justice Department official. Damn, what a swamp. Justice Department official who worked on civil matters and who, with the defendant, attempted to use the Justice Department to open sham election crime investigations and influence state legislatures with knowingly false claims of election fraud. God damn. Co-conspirator number 5, an attorney who assisted in devising and attempting to implement a plan to submit fraudulent slates of presidential electors to obstruct the certification proceeding. Co-conspirator number 6, a political consultant who helped implement and plan to submit fraudulent slates of presidential electors to obstruct the certification proceeding. Are there any MAGA in the chat that's gonna still vote for this fucking clown? Are you still gonna say MAGA Trump 2024 just to say it? Probably just to make people mad? You got that too, you guys. That's part of it. It's just the fact that they're triggering people, but just by saying Trump 2024. It's the same mentality as the Russians, right? We go through it every night on the war news. They will just literally still vote for Trump because they know it's going to piss people off, and that's it. They don't give a fuck. It is what it is. They don't care he's a traitor. They don't care what he's done. They don't give a shit. They just know that it triggers liberals or whatever the hell. You're going to own the libs. Gonna vote for a traitor to own the libs. The federal government function. The federal government function by which the results of the election for President of the United States are collected, counted, and certified was established through the Constitution and Electoral Act, the ECA, a federal law enacted in 1887. Oh. That's an old one. 1887, that shit's been around for quite some time. The Constitution provided that individuals called electors select the president and that each state determined for itself how to appoint the electors apportioned to it. Through state laws, each of the 50 states in the District of Columbia choose their electors based on the popular vote. After Election Day, the ECA is required to formally determine or ascertain the electors who would represent the state's voters by casting electoral votes on behalf of the candidate who had won the popular vote, and required the executive of each state to certify the federal government the identities of those electors. Then, on a date set by the ECA, each state's ascertained electors are required to meet and collect the results of the presidential election. That is, to cast electoral votes based on their state's popular vote, and to send their electoral votes along with the state's executive certification that they were the state's legitimate electors to the United States Congress to be counted and certified in an official proceeding. Finally, the Constitution and the ECA required that on the 6th of January, the following the election day, the Congress meet in a joint session for a certification proceeding presided over by the Vice President of the Senate to count the electoral votes, resolve any objections, and announce the result, thus certifying the winner of the presidential election as president-elect. This federal government function, from the point of ascertainment to the certification, is foundational to the United States democratic process, and until 2021 had operated in a peaceful and orderly manner for more than 130 years until Donald Trump. Although that sounds boring, right? Oh, that sounds like it would be in a pop quiz in a history class or something, or like a civics class, some boring shit. Like, damn, I gotta actually read that over and over again to understand what the hell that was. Yeah, it's supposed to be. It's just formalities. That was enacted in 1887 for 130 years. It just went on because there's nothing there. And Donald Trump and his little inner circle of gremlins decided we're gonna fuck with that. That's our way in right there. We're gonna start going and dismantling all of it. When they meant drain the swamp, they meant put their own swamp in and dismantle everything else. They didn't drain anything. They created a whole new swamp in the government. So all of that is a formality There was threats of it, and that's why we even started watching the votes being counted on January 6th. We had pulled up C-SPAN. Who was there? Who was watching our coverage on January 6th of 2021? That was crazy. And then I had went out for a safety meeting because it was literally dry. It was just C-SPAN and boring shit, like just formal shit, you know, signing papers, voting, you know, whatever, boring. And then I got the notification of what the Trump MAGA people were doing outside the Capitol, and we switched from the boring C-SPAN feed to the live feeds inside of the Capitol. So those that say I watched it and I didn't see anything, you're lying. You're a liar, liar, pants on fire. We watched it ourselves, and we watched MAGA's own streamers, because they had MAGA streamers too. They will again in 2024. They'll have people out there, political, and they'll be wearing Trump shit, and they'll be out there with their phone going live. Laura Loomer will be out there with them doing it, and they were the ones filming it, and we were watching them. So they all told on themselves. It was crazy. Manner and means. So let's continue. So 130 years of peaceful and orderly manner of that boring ass process was disrupted by Donald Trump and his gremlins. Manner and means. The defendant's conspiracy to impair, obstruct, and defeat the federal government function through dishonesty, fraud, and deceit included the following manner and means. The defendant and co-conspirators used knowingly false claims of election fraud to get state legislatures and election officials to subvert the legitimate election results and change electoral votes for the defendant's opponent, Joseph R. Biden Jr., to electoral votes for Trump. Dang. So everything that they were accusing of people, that they had the whole mule thing, and like they were saying that they were stuffing ballots for Biden. They were literally in the electors, they were having votes changed. That is, on the pretext of baseless fraud claims, the defendant pushed officials in certain states to ignore the popular vote, disenfranchise millions of voters, dismiss legitimate electors, and ultimately cause the ascertainment of and voting by illegitimate electors in favor of Donald Trump, who's the defendant. Like actively trying to take votes away from Biden and give them to Trump. Baseless claims, ignoring popular vote in certain, like they were openly attacking the electoral process, both publicly on the press, calling it a fake election, just doing that, but also actually physically behind the scenes. Dude, what the fuck? Anyone that's, dude, if you're MAGA at this point, you're a traitor as well. I don't give a shit. Cry and cope, but you're a traitor to the United States if you're gonna willfully be openly MAGA still at this point. You know what I mean? It's just insanity. You're also a traitor. The defendant and co-conspirators organized fraudulent slates of electors in 7 targeted states. So 7 targeted states, specifically Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. That sounds about right. Attempting to mimic the procedures that the legitimate electors were supposed to follow under the Constitution and other federal and state laws. This included causing the fraudulent electors to meet on the day appointed by federal law on which legitimate electors were to gather and cast their votes, cast fraudulent votes for the defendant, and sign certificates falsely representing that they were legitimate electors. This is the fraudulent electors thing that I read before the indictment came out, because that's in the news right now too. But it's in the indictment as well. It's right there that they were having literal fraudulent electors, you guys, and still to this day this happens. Some fraudulent electors were tricked into participating based on the understanding that their votes would be used only if the defendant succeeded in outcome determinative lawsuits within their state, which the defendant never did. The defendant and co-conspirators would cause these fraudulent electors to transmit their false certificates to the vice president and other government officials to be counted at the certification proceeding on January 6th. The defendant and co-conspirators attempted to use the power and authority of the Justice Department to conduct sham election crime investigations and send a letter to targeted states that falsely claimed that the Justice Department had identified significant concerns that may have impacted the election outcome. So they also, not only do they have false electors, but then they had false investigations into the false claims, and then use the in that they had at the Justice Department to give it some legitimacy to actually, so people would be scared. This is some, dude, this is like deep state activities. Like, if there is a deep state, Donald Trump is that. Those that are like the government working and shit, like to fuck people. This is in motion. They were doing it. They were the swamp the whole time. They're in motion. That's what it is. Using griminess to accomplish goals to further power. Are you shitting me? All right. That's sought to advance the defendant's fraudulent elector plan by using the Justice Department's authority to falsely present the fraudulent electors as valid alternative to the legitimate electors, and that urged on behalf of the Justice Department the targeted states' legislatures to convene to create the opportunity to choose the fraudulent electors over the legitimate electors. So they create, not only did they have fraudulent electors, but they created, they created a whole fake, wow, their whole shit was fake. The only thing that gave it the weight is the Justice Department conspirator. The whole thing. They had a... What the fuck? The whole thing was fake. Fake electors, reading fake votes, swapping in real legitimate votes for Joe. So Joe Biden probably had even more votes than what was real, than what came out in the numbers. He probably had even more. And then they had their own like method of verifying it was even by fraudulent. Wow, just fraudulent on multiple. This is like an onion. Talk about a swamp. This thing has layers, and it's all fraudulent on Donald Trump's side. The defendant and co-conspirators attempted to enlist the vice president to use a ceremonial role as the January 6th certification, proceeding to fraudulently alter the election results. First, using knowingly false claims of election fraud, the defendant and co-conspirators attempted to convince the vice president to use the defendant's fraudulent electors, reject legitimate electoral votes, or send legitimate electoral votes to state legislatures for review rather than counting them. When that failed, on the morning of January 6th, the defendant, who's Donald Trump, and co-conspirators repeated knowingly false claims of election fraud to gathered supporters, falsely told them that the vice president had the but we learned that in the January 6th hearings. MAGA that wanted to just pretend it was a kangaroo court. No, that was just to reveal the information to the public, and now this is the court. Not a kangaroo court, but this is a fucking court now. Now he's been indicted for it. But we learned that in the January 6th hearings. He knew before he took the podium on January 6th that he had lost legitimately, and he exercised all of his internal methods to try to remain president, or try to fight the fact that he had lost. He had done it all, and then when he was told that, no, Don, you lost, like by everyone, his own inner circle was even telling him this, he still ran with the fact that he still ran with a lie, and went up there on the podium on January 6th and told everyone that he had falsely, there's a false election fraud, I won, and he knew. So he lied, knowingly lying. After it became public on the morning of January 6th that the vice president would not fraudulently alter the election results, a large and angry crowd, including many individuals whom the defendant had deceived into believing the vice president could not and might change the election results, violently attacked the Capitol and halted the proceeding. As violence ensued, the defendant and co-conspirators exploited the disruption by redoubling efforts to levy false claims of election fraud and convince members of Congress to delay the certification based on those claims. So they set it all up on their own. They set it all up, and everyone that's going to say, well, Nancy Pelosi had the power to... No, she fucking didn't. No, she didn't. They did not have the power to do it, and they were actively trying. Even though they didn't have the power, they were actively trying to, and there's video evidence of Pelosi and all of them down there trying to figure it out, while Donald Trump was sitting in his room watching it all play out, happening, and he was the president. It was his lies that sent his brainless, mindless horde at the Capitol. It was his lies and his bullshit that sent them there. And then when they were breaking shit and like assaulting the police, back the blue went out the window very quickly. No, he did nothing. It took him hours before he made that little "go home, you are loved" video that he did. The defendant's knowledge of the falsity of his election fraud claims. The defendant, who's Donald Trump, like the video if you guys haven't, we're going through the Donald Trump indictment, the full new one. The indictment reading streams. This has become a whole new genre. The defendant, his co-conspirators, and their agents made knowingly false claims that there had been outcome determinative fraud in the 2020 presidential election. These prolific lies about election fraud, including dozens of specific claims that there had been substantial fraud in certain states, such as that large numbers of dead, non-resident, non-citizen, or otherwise ineligible voters had cast ballots, or that the voting machines, that was the voting machines one is the My Pillow guy. He's from Minnesota. Them vote the machines, Jimmy. Had changed votes for the defendant to Biden. So basically he's saying the machines were hacked, and My Pillow guy will still claim that to this day. These claims were false, and the defendant knew that they were false. In fact, the defendant was notified repeatedly that his claims were untrue, often by the people whom he relied on for candid advice on important matters, and who were best positioned to know the facts, and he deliberately disregarded the truth. For instance, the defendant's vice president, who personally stood to gain by remaining in office as part of the defendant's ticket, and whom the defendant asked to study fraud allegations, told the defendant that he had seen no evidence of outcome determinative fraud. No, they just say that they're running for president. No, the main one, dumbass, Ranger horse. The main one just openly is a politician and ran for president. Fucking dumbass. The senior leaders of the Justice Department appointed by the defendant and responsible for investigating credible allegations of election crimes told the defendant on multiple occasions for various allegations of fraud were unsupported. The Director of National Intelligence, the defendant's principal advisor on intelligence matters related to national security, disabused the defendant of the notion of the intelligence community's findings regarding foreign interference would change the outcome of the election. The Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is the CISA, whose existence the defendant signed into law to protect the nation's cybersecurity infrastructure from attack, joined an official multi-agency statement that there was no evidence that any voting system had been compromised, and that declared that the 2020 election was the most secure in American history. Days later, the CISA director, whom the defendant had appointed, announced publicly that the election security experts were in agreement that claims of computer-based election fraud were unsubstantiated. The defendant fired him. Why? You know what's funny? It's always the extremists. Always. It's always the MAGA, and if you are MAGA, you are an extremist. You know, cry about it, but you are one. And same with the opposite end of the spectrum. They hate when, like, you talk about their shit. When you talk about, like, their politics or down, they say, no, you shouldn't talk about politics. Or back when I do this, the communist shit, they hate when you show their shit too. They don't even, like, they want their pamphlets to be read. They want their propaganda to be read, but when you actually want to talk and interview them, they're what the fuck? Every time, without fail. Senior White House attorneys selected by the defendant to provide him candid advice informed the defendant that there was no evidence of outcome determinative election fraud and told him that his presidency would end on Inauguration Day. So basically everybody important, all the Homeland Security, Cybersecurity, Infrastructure Agency, Senior White House Intelligence, Senior White House attorneys, the Director of National Intelligence himself, senior leaders of the Justice Department, and Vice President Mike Pence himself all told Donald Trump, hey, your election claims are BS, bro. Hey Don, your election claims are no good. You lost. L Donald, right? And he still didn't listen to any of them. His own people. Remember, Donald Trump ran on the whole, I'm going to have my own people and they're going to be the smartest and the best. You know, I'm just a businessman, but I'm going to have the best people around me. Well, all the best people around him was telling him, hey, L, you lost. There's nothing to substantiate your claims of any of the election machines, the voting machines, none of it. All of them there. And again, that's coming from Mike Pence, senior leaders at the Justice Department, the literal director of national intelligence, the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, so representatives from that, which they go into deep shit cybersecurity nonsense, just in case there was any validity to his claims that maybe the Russians hacked the machines or something, which that didn't happen, but just they had to look into it. And then also his own senior White House attorneys, Donald Trump's own people. Oh, there's even more. Senior staffers on the defendant's 2020 re-election campaign, the defendant's campaign or campaign, whose sole mission was the defendant's re-election, told the defendant on November 7th, 2020 that he had only a 5 to 10% chance of prevailing in the election, and that success was contingent on the defendant winning in ongoing vote counts or litigation in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. Within a week of that assessment, the defendant lost in Arizona, which means that he had lost the election. You remember how many times Donald Trump's lost after he had some fights to do, and he lost again. The announcements of Biden winning in 2021 just kept coming every 2-3 weeks. State legislatures and officials, many of whom were the defendant's political allies, had voted for him, so Donald Trump's own people, and wanted him to be reelected, repeatedly informed the defendant that his claims of fraud in their states were unsubstantiated or false, and resisted his pressure to act based upon them. Good on them. Heroes. The guy in Georgia, all those in the states, even though they voted for Trump and they were allies of Donald Trump, voted for all of his policies, supported him, they all said no and did not fall to his pressure of trying to act based upon Donald Trump's lies, and they all held firm. So, and my concern is we're losing people like that, regardless of their political beliefs. When it comes down to straight up, like, this is fuck shit, like we're losing those people. But a lot of unknown people really kept this from becoming a nightmare of allowing Donald Trump's lies to take them, and then they start acting upon them. They said no. And also, after you reject the MAGA and you get rid of that, unfortunately, it's the driving force of the GOP right now. So the other hard part is a lot of people, like, as soon as you reject that, you are looked at as if you're a traitor, or as if they just look at you as if now you've like turned your back to the cult, and it is 100% like that. Anybody that says it's not like that is lying, or they themselves weren't in the MAGA world, or they weren't in Republican world and have tried to see the world from a new point of view. It's 100% like that. It's like cult mentality where you are immediately like the enemy. It's sad. The defendant widely disseminated his false claims of election fraud for months, despite the fact that he knew, and in many cases had been informed directly, that they were not true. The defendant's knowingly false statements were integral to his criminal plans to defeat the federal government function, obstruct the certification, and interfere with others' right to vote and have their votes counted. He made these knowingly false claims throughout the post-election time period, including those below that he made immediately before the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. The defendant insinuated that more than 10,000 dead voters had voted in Georgia. Just 4 days earlier, Georgia Secretary of State had explained to the defendant that this was false. The defendant asserted that there had been 205,000 more votes than voters in Pennsylvania. The defendant's acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general had explained to him that this was false. The defendant said that there was a suspicious vote dump in Detroit, Michigan. The defendant's attorney general had explained to the defendant that this was false, and the defendant's allies in the Michigan state legislature, the Speaker of the House Representative and Majority Leader of the Senate, had publicly announced that there was no evidence of substantial fraud within the state. The defendant claimed that there had been tens of thousands of double votes and other fraud in Nevada. The Nevada Secretary of State had previously rebutted the defendant's fraud claims by publicly posting a facts versus myths document explaining that the Nevada judges had reviewed and rejected them, and the Nevada Supreme Court had rendered a decision denying such claims. So Nevada, they went all the way up to the Supreme Court with that one. The defendant said there were more than 30,000 non-citizens had voted in Arizona. The defendant's own campaign manager had explained to him that such claims were false, and the Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives, who had supported Donald Trump during the election, had issued a public statement that there was no evidence of substantial fraud in Arizona. So this is coming from Trump's own people. And if you would have watched the January 6 hearings, even though Fox News told you not to, and your Republican friends told you not to, you would have known that all of Trump's people there that were testifying were Trump's people. They all voted for him. They all supported him, and they were all open there, raising their right hand, speaking the truth about him trying to overturn the election and saying that, hey, we tried to let Trump know. We told him that there's no point. You know, hey, Trump, stop. You're gonna lose. Like, stop. They're all Trump's people. There's minimal Democrats, like maybe one. And the only Democrats, honestly, were the ones sitting on the panel. Liz Cheney was the biggest Trump supporter. She supported Trump on like 97% of his policies, 95 to 97%. And she became an enemy to MAGA immediately, like as if she was never even a Trump supporter. And that's how it works. It's how it works. People to this day think I voted for Trump in 2016. I was a Republican my whole life. Couldn't do it in 2020 after being out there and seeing it for myself. Couldn't do it again, especially after everything. This was all kind of yuckiness happening before that. After 4 years of it, I couldn't do it. Couldn't do it again. Went third party in 2020. But to this day, people think I'm like a far left liberal, and that's how it works. As soon as you go against Republican land in the United States, you are immediately a liberal. You're immediately a far left, like whatever, dude. It's gonna. And if you're afraid to come out, if you're afraid to cast away the MAGA Republican identity, and now you're trying to find a new one, you're gonna go through it too. You're gonna go through it too. Your family members are gonna be weird. Your friends are gonna get shorter. And if you're European and you're like, what the fuck? I mean, it's just the reality of it here. It's just the reality of MAGA conservative world. As soon as you try to get out of that shit, you are a liberal now. Immediately liberal. Anyways, back to the indictment. The defendant said that more than 30,000 non-citizens had voted in Arizona. The defendant's own campaign manager said that the claims were false, and the Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives, who had supported the defendant in the election, had issued a public statement that there was no evidence of substantial fraud in Arizona. The defendant asserted that voting machines in various contested states had switched votes from the defendant to Biden. The defendant's attorney general, acting attorney general, and acting deputy attorney general all explained to him that this was false, and numerous recounts and audits had confirmed the accuracy of the voting machines. So it's just numerous amounts of evidence and people that had said, hey, Don, stop. L, you lost. Please. I mean, this is like a laundry list of important people. Laundry list. And it also went back and was all investigated in each individual state that he was making claims, just dragging this shit out. And they all came back and said false, fraudulent, not true, denying the claims, fraud in the state is not facts, false, false, false. Every single state that he claimed. And it was his own people, his own MAGA people that he had on there investigating it. And they all came out and said, nope, sorry. No fraud. Biden won. Biden W. Trump L. And he couldn't handle it. The criminal agreement and acts to effect in the object of the conspiracy. The defendant's use of the deceit to get state officials to subvert the legitimate election results and change electoral votes. Shortly after Election Day, which fell on November 3rd of 2020, the defendant launched his criminal scheme. On November 13th, the defendant's campaign attorneys conceded in court that he had lost the vote count in the state of Arizona, meaning, based on the assessment and the defendant's campaign advisors had given him just a week earlier, the defendant had lost the election. So the next day, the defendant turned to co-conspirator 1, whom he assumed would spearhead his efforts going forward to challenge the election results. I wonder if that's going to be Rudy Giuliani. From that point on, the defendant and his co-conspirators executed a strategy to use knowing deceit in the targeted states to impair, obstruct, or defeat the federal government So they went in strategy mode in each individual state that they had claimed there was fraud and was going to try to do what they're trying to cause conspiracy, doubt, obstruct each individual process in each state as well. Arizona. On November 13th, 2020, the defendant had a conversation with his campaign manager, who informed him that a claim had been circulating that a substantial number of non-citizens had voted in Arizona was false. On November 22nd, 8 days before the Arizona governor certified the ascertainment of the state legitimate electors based on the popular vote, the defendant and co-conspirator 1, called the Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives, had made knowingly false claims of election fraud aimed at interfering with the ascertainment of voting by Arizona's electors as follows. The defendant and co-conspirator 1 falsely asserted, among other things, that a substantial number of non-citizens, non-residents, and dead people had voted fraudulently in Arizona. The Arizona Speaker asked co-conspirator 1 for evidence of the claims, which co-conspirator 1 did not have, but claimed it's got to be Rudy Giuliani, would provide. Co-conspirator 1 never did so. The defendant and co-conspirator 1 asked the Arizona House Speaker to call the legislature into session to hold a hearing based on their claims of election fraud. The Arizona House Speaker refused, stating that doing so would require a 2/3 vote of its members, and he would not allow it without actual evidence of fraud. So they were just trying to go based off their claims alone, y'all. There's no evidence. They never have it. These types of people never have evidence. They never have. They're whistleblowers and all this bullshit. It's just bullshit. So it's just literal claims. There is nothing, nothing concrete to back up any of Donald Trump's claims of election fraud, election interference, voting machines. It's all lies. All of it was lies. None of it was true. Not a single bit of it. None of it was true. In every election, there will be a small percentage of people that will fudge some of the elections and the ballots always there's a small percentage, but never enough. It's not even mathematically possible to overturn an election with that. There's a small percentage of it, but to say that there's widespread voter fraud and claim that all of this bullshit, all of these machines and all of it is just lies and a grift, because they've made millions. They've made millions, and so do people pushing it. You know, I kind of want to do an experiment once and create like a podcast and just make it like a right-wing grifting podcast and just see how I do. I probably do good because I could tap into that world pretty well and just grift, just full on. Like I'm talking American merch, Eagle shit, like fucking just full on, just and sample and see how it goes, and then donate the money to like a charity or something afterwards, and just prove how easy it is to just grift and lie, but make money doing so. Like it's not just Donald Trump and them getting money for their re-election campaign based on the woe is me, because they got like the whole energy is, oh no, they're the deep state's coming after us, please give us money please, we got to keep the lights on type shit, right? That's exactly what it is. So then people send them money. But not only that, but like propagandists or people that have platforms, YouTube channels, or what podcasts, like I said, will keep this going and then like grift on that and get more money from people, because they'll keep like they'll keep it in their little news cycle and their little podcast cycle, and they'll keep talking about it and get more money. It's just a big money making shit off of lies. That's America. It's America. You can lie, cheat, and steal in the United States. Free speech. You can make money doing it too. On December 1st, back to the indictment. That's just the reality of the world we're in, the U.S. world. On December 1st, co-conspirator 1 met with the Arizona House Speaker. When the Arizona House Speaker again asked co-conspirator 1 for evidence of the outcome determinative election fraud, he and the defendant had been claiming. Co-conspirator 1 responded with words to the effect of, "We don't have the evidence, but we have lots of..." That co-conspirator 1 is Rudy Giuliani. That's co-conspirator 1. He said that. "We don't have the evidence, but we have lots of theories." What a fucking clown. It's all right. We gotta try to puzzle this together. Who's who here? No, I gotta find the... No, where's... No. Rudy said that. Why is it not in... Julia, here we go.
One of them make a comment that they didn't have evidence, but they had a lot of theories.
That was Mr. Giuliani.
Bang. So co-conspirator number 1 is Rudy Giuliani. Knew it.
And what exactly did he say and how that come up?
My recollection, he said, "We've got lots of theories, we just don't have the evidence."
What a clown.
And I don't know if that was a gaffe or maybe he didn't think through what he said, but both myself and others in my group, the 3 in my group and my council, both remembered that specifically, and afterwards we kind of laughed about it.
Duh. We have theory. We have evidence. We don't have evidence, but we just have theories, right? Stupid. So, all right. I watched the whole January 6 hearings. I remember that vividly. On December 4th, the Arizona Speaker issued a public statement that said, in part, "No election is perfect, and if there were evidence of illegal votes or improper count, then Arizona law provides a process to contest the election, a lawsuit under state law, but the law does not authorize the legislature to reverse the results of an election. As a conservative Republican, I don't like the results of the presidential election. I voted for President Trump and worked hard to re-elect him, but I cannot and will not entertain a suggestion that we violate current law to change the outcome of a certified election. Based. I and my fellow legislators swore an oath to support the United States Constitution and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona. It would violate that oath, the basic principles of Republican government, and the rule of law if we attempted to nullify the people's vote based on unsupported theories of fraud. Under the laws that we wrote and voted upon, Arizona voters choose who wins, and our system requires that their choice be respected." So that's the Speaker of the House of Arizona issuing a public statement on December 4th, basically saying, yeah, no, I wish Trump won. I voted for him, but what he's asking us to do, we cannot do. On the morning of January 4th, 2021, co-conspirator number 2, let's try to figure out who this one is, called the Arizona House Speaker to urge him to use a majority of the legislature to decertify the state's legitimate electors. Which one is number 2 again? This is like playing Clue. Co-conspirator number 2 is what now? An attorney who devised an attempt to implement a strategy to leverage the vice president's ceremonial role. Okay, so who do you guys think? So co-conspirator 1 is Rudy Giuliani. That one was easy. Number 2, it's got to be Eastman, likely. I think it was Eastman that wanted to influence Mike Pence. I think that was his move. All right, this might be Eastman. Yeah, Eastman or Powell, but probably Eastman. We're down here now. Okay, no. Okay, we're here now. So, on the morning of January 4th, co-conspirator 2, who might be Eastman, called the Arizona House Speaker to urge him to use a majority of the legislature to decertify the state's legitimate electors. Arizona's validity ascertained electors had voted 3 weeks earlier and sent their votes to Congress, which was scheduled to count those votes in Biden's favor in just 2 days' time at the January 6th certification proceeding. When the Arizona House Speaker explained that the state investigations had uncovered no evidence of substantial fraud in the state, co-conspirator number 2 conceded that he didn't know enough about facts on the ground in Arizona, but nonetheless told the Arizona House Speaker to decertify and let the courts sort it out. The Arizona House Speaker refused, stating that he would not play with the oath he had taken to uphold the United States Constitution and Arizona law. So Trump's little circle here was openly trying to, you know, influence the rule of law in Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, all of them, Nevada, Georgia. So that's it for Arizona. Now here's Georgia. On November 16th, 2020, on the defendant's behalf, his executive assistant sent co-conspirator number 3. Okay, who's number 3 again? I should just click the page. Okay, 3 is an attorney whose unfounded claims of election fraud the defendant privately acknowledged to others to sound crazy. That's probably Powell then, huh? Okay, so another attorney here for this one. All right. So he sent his executive assistant, co-conspirator 3, and others to document containing bullet points critical of a certain voting machine company, writing... Oh, we already got a nice. It looks like other Twitter accounts are trying to figure this out. So hold on. Let's figure it out ourselves. This is fun, but there's Twitter accounts dedicated to figuring out who the co-conspirators are and how I'm seeing that. All right. So, co-conspirator 3 responded 9 minutes later, writing, "It must go in all suits in Georgia and Pennsylvania immediately with a fraud claim that requires the entire election to be set aside in those states and machines impounded for nonpartisan professional inspection. It must go in all suits in Georgia and Pennsylvania immediately with a fraud claim that requires the entire election to be set aside." So he wrote that to... Wow, okay. I get it now. On November 25th, co-conspirator number 3 filed a lawsuit against the governor of Georgia, falsely alleging massive election fraud accomplished through the voting machine company's election software and hardware. Before the election was even filed, the defendant retweeted a post promoting it. The defendant did this despite the fact that when he discussed co-conspirator 3's far-fetched public claims regarding the voting company in private with advisors, the defendant had conceded that they were unsupported and that co-conspirator 3 sounded crazy. Co-conspirator 3's Georgia lawsuit was dismissed on December 7th. On December 3rd, co-conspirator 1 orchestrated, so this is back to Giuliani now, orchestrated a presentation to a judiciary subcommittee of the Georgia State Senate with the intention of misleading state senators into blocking the ascertainment of legitimate electors. During the presentation, an agent of the defendant and co-conspirator 1 falsely claimed that more than 10,000 dead people voted in Georgia. That afternoon, a senior advisor to the defendant told the defendant's chief of staff through text messages, "Hey, just an FYI, a campaign lawyer and his team verified that the 10,000 plus supposed dead people voting in Georgia is not accurate. It was alleged in co-conspirator 1's hearing today." The senior advisor clarified that he believed that the actual number was 12. So Giuliani claimed that there was 10,000 dead people that voted in Georgia. The real number? 12. Another agent of the defendant and co-conspirator 1 played a misleading excerpt of a video recording of ballot counting at the State Farm Arena in Atlanta and insinuated that it showed election workers counting suitcases of illegal ballots. Co-conspirator number 2 encouraged the legislators to decertify the state's legitimate electors based on false allegations of election fraud. Also, on December 3rd, the defendant issued a tweet amplifying the knowingly false claims made in co-conspirator 1's presentation in Georgia. Wow. Does this still exist? His old Twitter account's still there. All of his shit's still here. From 2021. It's like a gold mine of... Okay, Mark, look at March for Trump. Be part of history. Okay, he tweeted a lot. Okay, we're still on January 2nd. Okay. All right, you can go back. It's probably there still. Let's continue. Also on December 3rd, the defendant issued a tweet amplifying the knowingly false claims. And all right, we read that. Ballot stuffing by Democrats and Republicans were forced to leave the large counting room. Plenty more coming, but this alone leads to an easy win of the state. On December 4th, the Georgia Secretary of State's chief operating officer debunked the claims made at co-conspirator 1's presentation the previous day, issuing a tweet stating the 90-second video of election workers at the State Farm Arena purporting to show fraud was watched in its entirety by the Georgia Secretary of State investigators. Shows normal ballot processing. Here is the fact check on it. On December 7th, he reiterated during a press conference that the claim that there had been misconduct at State Farm Arena was false. So not a single one of Trump's claims at this point throughout this entire indictment is even legit. There's nothing. Not a single one. He lied about it all. But again, we knew this. If you would have watched the January 6th hearings, they revealed this to everyone. They showed it all to us. All of Trump's closest people, all of his inner circle were telling him, yo, you lost. Stop. Don't go forward with this. It's not. And then he went forward with it anyways and lied and is still lying to this day. And morons believe it. And they, you know what it is? They want to believe it, because they just can't ever see themselves as being not MAGA. They've completely made their identity that. Their friends are that. They don't want to lose their inner circle, their friends, their family. So they're just, even with all the evidence here, and even with all of it showing that, yo, he lied. He lost the election fair and square, and he lied. And all of this BS is just nothing but BS, smoke and mirrors. MAGA folks' favorite saying is, what are they distracting us from? All of this, all of the claims of election frauds and all of it was smoke and mirrors from the fact that he lost. And he just piled all of this on to add news and make things and distract people and try to drag it out. But he lied and he lost. Also on December 8th, a senior campaign advisor who spoke with the defendant on a daily basis had informed him on multiple occasions that various fraud claims were untrue. expressed frustration that many of co-conspirator 1 and his legal team's claims could not be substantiated. This is a common theme here. As early as mid-November, for instance, the senior campaign advisor had informed the defendant that his claims of a large number of dead voters in Georgia were untrue. With respect to the persistent false claim regarding the State Farm Arena, on December 8th, the senior campaign advisor wrote in an email, "When our research and campaign legal team can't back up any of the claims made by our elite strike force legal team, you can see why we're 0 for 32 on our cases. I'll obviously hustle to help up on all fronts, but it's tough to own any of this when it's all just conspiracy shit beamed down from the mothership." Dang. Dang. On December 10th, 4 days before Biden's Biden's validly ascertained electors, validly. I don't know why my brain broke on that one. 4 days before Biden's validly ascertained electors were scheduled to cast votes and send them to Congress, co-conspirator 1 appeared at a hearing before the Georgia House of Representatives Government Affairs Committee. Co-conspirator 1 played the State Farm Arena video again and falsely claimed that it showed voter fraud right in front of people's eyes, and it was the tip of the iceberg. Then he cited 2 election workers by name, baselessly accused them of quite obviously surreptitiously what is that word? Surreptitiously? What the fuck is that word? What is that one? What does that mean? In a way that attempts to avoid notice or attention.
Surreptitiously.
Surreptitiously. New words. Learning new words in this indictment. Surreptitiously passing around USB ports as if they are vitals of heroin or cocaine, and suggested that they were criminals whose places of work, their homes, should have been searched for evidence of ballots, for evidence of USB ports, for evidence of voter fraud. Thereafter, the election workers received numerous death threats. So that was on December 10th. Some big words in there. But basically, the Georgia House of Representatives said, nah. And they tried passing around USB ports, evidence of USB ports, tried to figure out evidence of voter fraud, and the electors, for doing so, received death threats. Like, they made a conspiracy out of it. On December 15th, the defendant summoned the incoming acting attorney general. The incoming acting attorney general and others to the Oval Office to discuss allegations of election fraud. During the meeting, the Justice Department officials specifically refuted the defendant's claims about the State Farm Arena, claiming to him that the activity shown on the tape co-conspirator 1 had used was benign. Basically, that it's all lies. All of it is lies. The State Farm Arena speech was nothing but else. Nothing's true. December 23rd. A day after the defendant's chief of staff personally observed the signature verification process at Cobb County Civic Center, had notified the defendant that the state election officials were conducting themselves in an exemplary fashion and would find fraud if it existed. The defendant tweeted that the Georgia officials administering the signature verification process were trying to hide evidence of election fraud and were, quote, terrible people. In a phone call on December 27th, the defendant spoke with the acting attorney general and the acting deputy attorney general. During the call, the defendant again pressed the unfounded claims regarding the State Farm Arena, and the 2 top Justice Department officials again rebutted the allegations, telling them that the Justice Department had reviewed the videotape and interviewed witnesses and had not identified any suspicious conduct. So this has to do with the counting of the votes. Counting of the people going through the boxes and shit, where they said that things were nefarious with the boxes and shit, and they were just claiming this, and none of it was true. It was all looked at. Hours of surveillance tape, hours of footage were watched from the Justice Department inside of Georgia and beyond, and none of it was found to be substantiated. On December 31st, the defendant signed a verification affirming false election fraud allegations made on his behalf in a lawsuit filed in his name against the Georgia governor. In advance of the filing, co-conspirator number 2, who was advising the defendant on the lawsuit, acknowledged in an email that he and the defendant had, since signing a previous verification, had been made aware that some of the allegations and evidence proffered by the experts had been inaccurate, and that signing a new affirmation with that knowledge and incorporation by reference would not be accurate. The defendant and co-conspirator 2 caused the defendant's signed verification to be filed nonetheless. So even knowing that the claims are inaccurate, signing it with knowledge would still not be accurate. They filed it anyways. On January 2nd, 4 days before Congress certified proceeding, the defendants and others called Georgia's Secretary of State. During the call, the defendant lied to the Georgia Secretary of State to induce him to alter Georgia's popular vote count and call into question the validity of the Biden electors' votes who had been transmitted to Congress weeks before, including as follows. The defendant raised allegations regarding the State Farm Arena video and repeatedly disparaged one of the same election workers that co-conspirator 1, who's Rudy Giuliani, had maligned on December 10th, using her name almost 20 times and falsely referring to her as a professional vote scammer and hustler. In response, the Georgia Secretary of State refuted this. You're talking about the State Farm video, and I think it's extremely unfortunate that Rudy Giuliani, or his people, sliced and diced that video and took it out of context. When the Georgia Secretary of State then offered a link to a video that would disprove co-conspirator 1's claims, the defendant responded, "I don't care about a link. I don't need it. I have a much..." Georgia Secretary of State, "I have a much better link." So Donald Trump was offered the full video, and he wanted the fake one instead. The defendant asked about rumors that paper ballots cast in the election were being destroyed, and the Georgia Secretary of State's counsel explained to him that the claim had been investigated and was not true. Donald Trump claimed that 5,000 dead people voted in Georgia, causing the Georgia Secretary of State to respond, "Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data here is wrong. The actual number were two people that were dead and voted, and so your information's wrong. That's 2. So claiming 5,000 dead people voted, they had 2 votes from the dead in total. Donald Trump claimed that thousands of out-of-state voters had cast ballots in Georgia's election, which the Georgia Secretary of State's counsel refuted, explaining, "We've been going through each of those as well, and those numbers that we got, the Donald Trump's counsel was just saying, well, they're not accurate. Everyone we've been through are people that lived in Georgia, moved to a different state, but then moved back to Georgia legitimately. They moved back in years ago. This was not like something just before the election." In response to multiple other of the defendant's allegations, the Georgia Secretary of State's counsel told the defendant that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation was examining all such claims and finding no merit to them at all. The defendant said that he needed to find 11,780 votes and insinuated that the Georgia Secretary of State and his counsel could be subjected to criminal prosecution if they failed to find election fraud as he demanded, stating, "Are you going to find that they are, which is totally illegal? If it is, it's more illegal for you than it is for them because you know what they did and you're not reporting it. That's a criminal, that's a criminal offense. And you can't let that happen. That's a big risk to you and the Georgia Secretary of State's counsel, your lawyer." That's the so-called perfect phone call. Right? That's the perfect phone call that they will claim. And they say it's the perfect phone call because that's how Donald Trump describes it, and they're fucking sheep and will just repeat what he says.
All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state, and flipping the state is a great testament to our country, because, you know, there's just, it's a testament that they can admit to a mistake, or whatever you want to call it, if it was a mistake, I don't know.
If we could just go over some of the numbers, I think it's pretty clear that we won. We won very substantially, Georgia. We have at least two or three, anywhere from 250 to 300,000 ballots were dropped mysteriously into the rolls. Much of that had to do with Fulton County, which hasn't been checked. We think that if you check the signatures, a real check of the signatures going back in Fulton County, you'll find at least a couple of 100,000 of forged signatures. The bottom line is when you add it all up, and then you start adding, 300,000 fake ballots, then the other thing they said is in Fulton County and other areas, and this may or may not be true, this just came up this morning, that they are burning their ballots, that they are shredding ballots and removing equipment. They're changing the equipment on the Dominion machines. And,
the Dalmatian machines.
That's not legal. And they supposedly shredded, I think they said 3,000 pounds of ballots. And that just came to us as a report today. And, it's a very sad situation. They weren't in an official voter box. They were in what looked to be suitcases or trunks, suitcases, but they weren't in voter boxes. The minimum number it could be, because we watched it and they watched it certified in slow motion, instant replay, if you can believe it, but had slow motion
instant
magnified
replay
many times over. And the minimum it was 18,000 ballots, all for Biden.
All right, so all of that was all of that's lies. Everything he said, he just keeps going, and in the phone call you try to hear the Georgia election chief try to cut in and correct Trump, and then Trump will go, he's a big baby, big crybaby. So there's the phone call with the Georgia elector saying we need to find 11,780 votes. The next day, on January 3rd, the defendant falsely claimed that the Georgia Secretary of State had not addressed the defendant's allegations, publicly stating that the Georgia Secretary of State was unwilling or unable to answer questions such as the ballots under the table, scam, ballot destruction, out-of-state voters, dead voters, and more. He has no clue. On January 6th, the defendant publicly repeated the knowingly false insinuation that more than 10,300 people had voted in Georgia. Dead people had voted. False, right? Only two. So that's Georgia. Damn, this is an individual each state. So here's Michigan now. On November 5th, 2020, the defendant claimed that there had been a suspicious dump of votes, purportedly illegitimate ballots, stating, in Detroit, there were hours of unexplained delay in delivering many of the votes for counting. The final batch did not arrive until 4 in the morning, and even though the polls closed at 8 o'clock. So they brought it in, and the batches came in, and nobody knew where they came from. On November 20th, 3 days before Michigan's governor signed the certificate of ascertainment notifying the federal government that based on the popular vote, Biden's electors were to represent Michigan's voters, the defendant held a meeting in the Oval Office with the Speaker of the Michigan House of Representatives and the Majority Leader of the Michigan Senate. In the meeting, the defendant, who's Donald Trump, raised his false claim, among others, of an illegitimate vote dump in Detroit. In response, the Michigan Senate Majority Leader told the defendant that he had lost Michigan not because of fraud, but because the defendant had underperformed with certain voter populations within the state. Basically saying, you lost due to the fact that you didn't get the vote, like people didn't vote for you. They didn't, you lost. All right, there's no fraud. Upon leaving their meeting, the Michigan House Speaker and Michigan Senate Majority Leader issued a statement reiterating this. The Senate and House Oversight Committees are actively engaged in a thorough review of Michigan's elections process, and we have faith in the committee process to provide greater transparency and accountability to our citizens. We have not yet been made aware of any information that would change the outcome of the election in Michigan, and as legislative readers, we will follow the law and follow the normal process regarding Michigan's electors, just as we have said throughout this election. On December 1st, the defendant raised his Michigan vote dump claim with the Attorney General, who responded that what had occurred in Michigan had been the normal vote counting process, and there was no indication of fraud in Detroit. Despite this, the next day the defendant made a knowingly false statement in that Michigan in the morning and the vote dump of 149,772 votes came in uninspectedly. We were winning by a lot, he said. The batch was received in horror. Nobody knows anything about it. It's corrupt. Detroit is corrupt. I have a lot of friends in Detroit. They know it, but Detroit is totally corrupt. Donald Trump. On December 4th, co-conspirator 1 sent a text message to Michigan House Speaker reiterating that his unsupported claim of election fraud and attempting to get the Michigan House Speaker to assist in reversing the ascertainment of the legitimate Biden electors, stating, "Looks like Georgia may well hold some factual hearings and change the certification under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution." As co-conspirator 2 explained, they just don't have the right to do it, but the obligation. Help me get this done in Michigan. Similarly, on December 7th, despite still having established no fraud in Michigan, co-conspirator 1, who's Rudy Giuliani, had sent a text intended for the Michigan Senate Majority Leader. So I need you to pass a joint resolution from the Michigan legislature that states that the election is in dispute. There's an ongoing investigation by the legislature, and the electors sent by Governor Whitmer are not the official electors of the state of Michigan and do not fall within the safe harbor deadline of the December 8th Michigan law. So they were actively trying to change the rules. Lie, deceit. Get the Michigan Senate Majority Leader to just say that the election's in dispute and that, the real electors aren't the real ones. We have to install our electors, the fake ones. On December 14th, the day that electors in states across the country were required to vote and submit their votes to Congress, the Michigan House Speaker and Michigan Senate Majority Leader announced that, contrary to the defendant's requests, they would not decertify the legitimate election results or electors in Michigan. The Michigan Senate Majority Leader's public statement included, "We have not received evidence of fraud on a scale that would change the outcome of the election in Michigan." Here's the Michigan House Speaker's public statement read in part. "We have diligently examined these reports of fraud to the best of our ability. I fought hard for President Trump. No one wanted him to win more than me. I think he's done an incredible job, but I love our republic too. I can't fathom risking our norms, traditions, and institutions to pass a resolution retroactively changing the electors for Donald Trump, simply because some think there have not been enough widespread fraud to give him the win." At this point, if you're still MAGA, if you still support Donald Trump, you don't even claim to be an American anymore. Don't even claim to be a patriot. You're not American. You're a mafia-loving fascist. And we don't do that in the United States. Okay? We don't do that here. So if you're still MAGA and you still want to vote for Trump, given all of this information now at this point, there's no hope for you. Okay? And I really hope that you just go back into the hole that you came out from. Because Trump really pulled a lot of people out of holes that had these bigoted opinions and these bigoted lifestyle, and there's fascists that just came out from the woodwork when Trump started running and kept running and keeps these lies going. And the people that are still voting for him or that are still interested in him, I don't know how your brain works, dude. Your brain's faulty. And I have a different working brain. My brain works on a different operating system. I'm neurodivergent. But golly, even with all this evidence, and you're still gonna vote for Trump, dude? Not American. Definitely not. Trump's not American for doing this shit. On January 6, 2021, the defendant publicly repeated his knowingly false claim regarding an illicit dump of more than 100,000 ballots in Detroit, knowing that that is just a false claim. So basically, So far, the moral of the whole story is that every single claim he's ever made, every single lie, it's just been all lies. Everything. All of it. Not a single bit of it's been true at all. Pennsylvania, on November 11th, the defendant publicly maligned a Philadelphia city commissioner for stating on the news that there was no evidence of widespread fraud in Philadelphia. As a result, the Philadelphia city commissioner and his family received death threats. On November 25th, the day after Pennsylvania's governor signed a certificate of ascertainment and thus certified the federal government that Biden's electors were the legitimate electors for the state, Co-Conspirator 1 orchestrated an event at a hotel in Gettysburg, attended by state legislatures. Co-Conspirator 1, who's Rudy Giuliani, falsely claimed that Pennsylvania had issued 1.8 million absentee ballots and received 2.5 million in return. In the days thereafter, the campaign staffer wrote internally that Co-Conspirator 1's allegation was just wrong, and there's no way to defend it. The deputy campaign manager responded, "We have been saying this for a while. It's very frustrating." On December 4th, after 4 Republican leaders of the Pennsylvania legislature issued a public statement that the General Assembly lacked the authority to overturn the popular vote and appoint its own state of electors, and that doing so would violate the state election code and constitution, the defendant retweeted a post labeling the legislatures as cowards. So strong-arming them, trying to, because he knows that they have a base to do this, that he can just send his fascist base to harass people. On December 31st and January 3rd, the defendant repeatedly raised with the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general the allegation that in Pennsylvania there had been 205,000 more votes than voters. Each time, the Justice Department officials informed the defendant that his claim was false. On January 6, 2021, the defendant publicly repeated his knowingly false claim that there had been more than 205,000 votes than voters in Pennsylvania. So, all lies. Pennsylvania, same thing. Wisconsin, our neighbor state. On November 29th, 2020, a recount in Wisconsin that the defendant's campaign had petitioned and paid for did not change the election result, and in fact increased the defendant's margin of defeat. Damn. On December 14th, Wisconsin Supreme Court rejected an election challenge by the campaign. The justice wrote, "Nothing in this case casts any legitimate doubt that the people of Wisconsin lawfully chose Vice President Biden and Senator Harris to be the next leaders of our great country." On December 21st, as a result of the state Supreme Court's decision, the Wisconsin governor, who had signed a certificate of ascertainment on November 30th identifying Biden's electors as the state's legitimate electors, signed a certificate of final determination in which he recognized that the state Supreme Court had resolved a controversy regarding the appointment of Biden electors and confirmed that Biden had received the highest number of votes in the state and that his electors were the state's legitimate electors. That same day, in response to the court decision that had prompted the Wisconsin governor to sign a certificate of final determination, the defendant, Donald Trump, issued a tweet repeating his knowingly false claim of election fraud and demanding that the Wisconsin legislature overturn the election results that had led to the ascertainment of Biden's electors as the legitimate electors. On December 27th, the defendant, Donald Trump, raised with the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general a specific fraud claim that there had been more votes than voters in Wisconsin. The acting deputy attorney general informed the defendant that the claim was false. On January 6, 2021, the defendant repeatedly, publicly spread false claims that there had been tens of thousands of unlawful votes in the state of Wisconsin. So, just lies. He needs to be thrown in prison. Like, as soon as possible. Shouldn't even be able. And the shitty part is even though you're in prison, you can still run for president. So that's going to be an interesting time. Gonna be very interesting, but he needs to go to jail as soon as possible. The defendant's use of dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to organize fraudulent slates of electors and cause them to transmit false certificates to Congress. As the defendant's attempts to obstruct the electoral vote through deceit of state officials met with repeated failure, beginning in early December of 2020, he and co-conspirators developed a new plan to marshal individuals who would have served as the defendant's electors had he won the popular vote in 7 targeted states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and cause those individuals to make and send the vice president and Congress false certifications that they were legitimate electors. Under the plan, the submission of these fraudulent slates would create a fake controversy at the certification proceeding and position the vice president presiding on January 6th as the president of the Senate. To support legitimate electors with the defendant's fake electors and certify the defendant as president. The plan capitalized on ideas presented in the memoranda drafted by co-conspirator 5, an attorney who was assisting the defendant's campaign with legal efforts related to a recount in Wisconsin. The memoranda evolved over time from a legal strategy to preserve the defendant's rights to a corrupt plan to subvert the federal government function by stopping Biden's electors' votes from being counted and certified as follows. So they had the electors' mementos here. I'll just read one of them. The November 18th memorandum, Wisconsin memo, advocated that because of the ongoing recount in Wisconsin, the defendants' electors there should meet and cast votes on December 14th, the date the ECA required appointed electors to vote, to preserve an alternative of the defendant's Wisconsin elector in the event the defendant ultimately prevailed in the state. Damn. They only went deep, or they tried. They tried to go as deep as they possibly could with this, with getting their own people and electors in positions to try to. Wow. This is like the biggest attack on our voting process and our democracy that we've ever seen. The December 9th memorandum, fraudulent elector instructions, consisted of co-conspirator 5's instructions on how fraudulent electors could mimic legitimate electors in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Co-conspirator 5 noted that in some states it would be virtually impossible for the fraudulent electors to successfully take the same steps as the legitimate electors because state law required formal participation in the process by state officials. So this is more on the fake electors. The plan began in early December, and ultimately the conspirators and the defendant's campaign took the Wisconsin memo and expanded it to any state that the defendant claimed was contested, even New Mexico, which the defendant had lost by more than 10% of the popular vote. This expansion was forecast by emails and the defendant's chief of staff sent on December 6th, forwarding the Wisconsin memo to campaign staff and writing, "We just need to have someone coordinating the electors for states." On December 6th, the defendant and co-conspirator 2 called the chairwoman of the Republican National Committee to ensure that the plan was in motion. During the call, co-conspirator 2 told the chairwoman that it was important for the RNC to help the defendant's campaign gather electors in targeted states, and falsely represented to her that such electors' votes would be used only if ongoing litigation in one of the states changed the results of the defendant's favor. Damn. After the RNC chairwoman consulted the campaign and heard that work on gathering electors was underway, she called and reported this information to the defendant, who responded approvingly. Dang. The RNC chairwoman. Dude, the Republican National Committee's in on it too. 100%. On December 7th, co-conspirator 1 received the Wisconsin memo and the fraudulent elector memo. The co-conspirator 1 spoke with co-conspirator 6 regarding attorneys who could assist in the fraudulent elector effort in the targeted states, and he received from co-conspirator 6 an email identifying attorneys in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. The next day, on December 8th, co-conspirator 5 called the Arizona attorney on co-conspirator 6's list. In an email after the call, the Arizona attorney recounted his conversation with co-conspirator 5 as follows. I just talked to the gentleman who did that memo. His idea is basically that all of us, Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, Pennsylvania, etc., have our electors to send in their votes even though the votes aren't legal under federal law, because they're not signed by the governor, so that members of Congress can fight about whether they should be counted on January 6th. This could potentially argue that they're not bound by federal law because their Congress could make it the new law. Kind of wild creative, I'm happy to discuss. My comment to him was that I guess there's no harm in it, legally at least. I.e., we would just be sending in fake electoral votes to Pence so that someone in Congress can make an objection when they start counting votes and start arguing that the fake votes should be... That's not illegal? Kind of wild and creative, it says. Kind of wild and creative. What kind of shit is that? Isn't that from... Interesting. So basically just trying to derail the process and getting people talking about fake shit. That's what they do though. At co-conspirator 1's direction on December 10th, co-conspirator 5 sent 2 points of contact in all targeted states except Wisconsin, which had already received his memos, in New Mexico a streamlined version of the Wisconsin memo, which did not reveal the intended fraudulent use of the defendant's electors and the fraudulent elector instructions along with fraudulent elector certificates that he had drafted. On the next day, on December 11th, through co-conspirator 5, co-conspirator 1 suggested that the Arizona lawyer file a petition for certiorari in the Supreme Court as a pretext to claim that litigation was pending in the state to provide cover for the convening and voting of the defendant's fraudulent electors there. So they're trying to provide legitimacy to the fake elector shit. Dang, dude, wow. Oh, the real deep state here. It could appear treasonous for the Arizona electors to vote on Monday if there was no pending court proceeding. To manage the plan in Pennsylvania, on December 12th, co-conspirator 1, co-conspirator 5, and co-conspirator 6 participated in a conference call organized by the defendant's campaign with the defendant's electors in that state. When the defendant's electors expressed concern about signing certificates representing themselves as legitimate electors, co-conspirator 1, who is Rudy Giuliani, falsely assured them that their certificates would be used only if the defendant succeeded in litigation. What a fucking... what a grimy bastard, huh? Basically trying to set these people up, whoever the fake electors were, which... Bro, how do you even get involved in such a thing? Like, how do you just get involved in that? So, I mean, there's got to be some griminess with the electors too, but they were like, yeah, you know, you guys are the fake ones, but we're not going to use your fake votes unless Trump wins the litigation. So don't worry about it, right? We got you. Subsequently, co-conspirator 6 circulated proposed conditional language to that effect for potential inclusion in the fraudulent elector certificates. A campaign official cautioned not to offer the conditional language to other states because the other states are signing what he prepared. If it gets out that we change the language for Pennsylvania, it could snowball. In some cases, the defendant's electors refuse to participate in the plan. My God. Yo, he needs to be put in prison. Like when is the... He needs to be put in prison. I am aware of every single aspect of all 7 failed attempts within this coup attempt. I know there is one. I want to see the tide of Russia's involvement. First time donation. I support what you do. Thank you greatly. Thank you so much, Jesse from Dallas, Texas, for that big super chat. Yeah, I need to see how deep it goes, because they were really working this thing here. They were doing every nook and cranny of the people they needed, and the false electors and the false certifications and the false board that would certify it that was fake, and then just to get senators on TV talking about it basically and giving it. They just needed their base to believe it, is what it is. They don't need it. Doesn't. They just need their base to believe it hard enough and do shit like January 6th and go to buildings and be sent places. Insane. On December 13th, the defendant asked the senior campaign advisor for an update on what was going on with the elector plan and directed him to put out a statement on electors. As a result, co-conspirator 1 directed the senior campaign advisor to a joint conference call with him, co-conspirator 6, and others. When senior campaign advisor related these developments in text messages to the deputy campaign manager, a senior advisor to the defendant, and a campaign staffer, the deputy campaign manager responded. Here's the thing. The way this has morphed, it's a crazy play, so I don't know who wants to put their name on it. The senior advisor wrote certifying illegal votes. In turn, the participants in the group text message refused to have a statement regarding electors attributed to their names because none of them could stand by it. Certifying illegal. So all of the illegal votes and the illegal everything was from Trump, even though they had lost, and none of it was going to help them win. All of the illegal ballot casting and electors and fake shit was all Trump campaign. All of their accusations were their own actions. Everything they were accusing of Biden voters or whatever the fuck that meant, right? Or whatever of doing, they themselves were doing it themselves. On December 13th, at a campaign staffer's request, co-conspirator 5 drafted and sent fraudulent elector certificates for the defendant's electors in New Mexico, which had not been previously been among the targeted states, and where there was no pending litigation on the defendant's behalf. The next day, the defendant's campaign filed an election challenge suit in New Mexico at 11:54 a.m., 6 minutes before the noon deadline for electors' votes, as a pretext so that there was pending litigation there at the time the fraudulent electors voted. Dirty. On December 14th, the legitimate electors of all 50 states and the District of Columbia met their respective jurisdictions to formally cast their votes for president, resulting in a total of 232 electoral votes for the defendant and 306 for Biden. The legitimate electoral votes that Biden won in the states that the defendant targeted and the defendant's margin of defeat were as follows. Arizona, 11 electoral votes, which is 10,457. Georgia, 16 electoral votes. Michigan, 16 electoral votes. Nevada, 6. New Mexico, 5. Pennsylvania, 20. And Wisconsin with 10 in terms of electoral votes. On the same day, at the direction of the defendant and co-conspirator 1, who is Rudy Giuliani, fraudulent electors convened sham proceedings in the 7 targeted states to cast fraudulent electoral ballots in favor of the defendant. So he was doing like fake, like this is like Russia type shit, y'all. You like when they had the sham votes to annex portions of Ukraine? And that bullshit, that's basically what they did here. They had fraudulent sham proceedings. In some states, in order to satisfy legal requirements set forth by legitimate electors under state law, state officials were enlisted to provide fraudulent electors access to state capitol buildings so they could gather and vote there. In many cases, however, as co-conspirator 5 had predicted in the fraudulent elector instructions, the fraudulent electors were unable to satisfy the legal requirements, because they're fraudulent. Nonetheless, as directed in the fraudulent elector instructions shortly after the fraudulent electors met on the 14th, the targeted states' fraudulent elector certificates were mailed to the President of the United States, the Archivist of the United States, and others. The defendant and co-conspirators ultimately used the certificates of the fraudulent electors to deceitfully target the government function, and did so contrary to how fraudulent electors were told they would be used. Unlike those of fraudulent electors consistent with the ECA, legitimate electors' signed certificates were annexed to the state's executives' certificates of ascertainment, being sent to the President of the Senate and others. That evening of 6:26 p.m., RNC chairwoman forwarded to the defendant through his executive assistant an email titled Electors Recap Final, which represented that in 6 contested states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, the defendant's electors had voted in parallel to Biden's electors. The defendant's executive assistant responded, "It's in front of him." So Rhonda McDaniel personally also hand-delivered or forwarded an email saying that it's done. It's still done. The defendant's attempt to leverage the Justice Department to use deceit to get state officials to replace legitimate electors and electoral votes with the defendants. Wow. Dude, it goes so deep. So deep. In late December of 2020, the defendant attempted to use the Justice Department to make knowingly false claims of election fraud to officials in the targeted states through a formal letter under the acting attorney general's signature, thus giving the defendant's lies the backing of the federal government and attempt to improperly influence the targeted states to replace legitimate Biden electors with Donald Trump electors. On December 22nd, the defendant met with co-conspirator 4 at the White House. Co-conspirator 4 had not been informed of his leadership of the Justice Department of the meeting, which was a violation of the Justice Department's written policy restricting contacts with the White House to guard against improper political influence. So they breached a rule. There's already a safeguard for that, for improper political influence, and they broke that one as well. On December 26, co-conspirator 4 spoke on the phone with the acting attorney general and lied about the circumstances of his meeting with the defendant at the White House, falsely claiming that the meeting had been unplanned. The acting attorney general directed co-conspirator 4 not to have unauthorized contacts with the White House again, and co-conspirator 4 said he would not. I think co-conspirator 4 is Jeffrey Clark. Jeffrey Clark. You're trumped out. You're not even, are you an American? How could you get trumped out? Listen, we have to deal with this in the United States. It's like, you know what's goes so crazy to me? Anytime we talk about domestic issues within the US, people that aren't even from here get annoyed with it. Like, how do you think of living here? Try living here in the United States and dealing with this, and then whenever you want to talk about domestic politics, people will go, "Oh, I'm done with it. I'm tired. I'm all trumped out. I'm tired of hearing about it." I don't care. We got what? 10, 20, 17 more pages to go. Lock in. The next morning, on December 27th, contrary to acting attorney general's direction, co-conspirator 4 spoke with the defendant of the defendant's cell phone for nearly 3 minutes. That afternoon, the defendant called the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general and said, among other things, "People tell me co-conspirator 4 is great. I should put him in." The defendant also raised multiple false claims of election fraud, which the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general refuted. When the acting attorney general told the defendant that the Justice Department could not and would not change the outcome of the election, the defendant responded, "Just say that the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and Republican congressmen." So just don't even give evidence. Just say that it was corrupt. Words, no meaning, and that it was just up to us and the Republican congressman. Didn't even go forward. On December 28th, co-conspirator 4 sent a draft letter to the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general, which he proposed they all sign. The draft was addressed to state officials in Georgia, and co-conspirator 4 proposed sending versions of the letter to elected officials in targeted states. The proposed letter contained numerous knowingly false claims about the election and false in the Justice Department, including that A. The Justice Department had identified significant concerns that may have impacted the outcome of the election in multiple states. The Justice Department believed that in Georgia and other states, 2 valid slates of electors had gathered at the proper location on December 14th, and that both sets of ballots had been transmitted to Congress. That is, Conspirator 4's letter sought to advance the defendant's fraudulent elector plan by using the authority of the Justice Department to falsely present the fraudulent electors as valid alternative to the legitimate electors. The Justice Department urged that the state legislature convene a special legislative session to create the opportunity to, among other things, choose the fraudulent electors over the legitimate electors. So this is all just to back up the latest reporting that's been coming out about Donald Trump and their little inner circle getting false fraudulent electors to cast votes for Trump, and say that these, and then also create the system around it and a fraudulent system to legitimize it. So they're just doing fake shit, just completely fake shit all around. The acting attorney general promptly responded to co-conspirator 4 by email and told him that his proposed letter was false, writing, "Despite dramatic claims to the contrary, we have not seen the type of fraud call into question that the reported and certified results of the election." In a meeting shortly thereafter, acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general again directed co-conspirator 4 not to have unauthorized contact with the White House. On December 31st, the defendant summoned to the Oval Office the acting attorney general, acting deputy attorney general, and other advisors. In the meeting, Donald Trump again raised claims about election fraud that the Justice Department officials already had told him were not true, and that the senior Justice Department officials reiterated were false, and suggested he might change the leadership in the Justice Department. On January 2nd of 2021, just 4 days before the Congress certification proceeding, co-conspirator 4 tried to coerce the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general to sign and send co-conspirator 4's draft letter, which contained false statements to state officials. He told them that the defendant was considering making co-conspirator 4 the new acting attorney general, but that co-conspirator 4 would decline the defendant's offer if the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general would agree to send the proposed letter to the targeted states. The Justice Department officials refused. So he tried to coerce them by saying, "Hey, Donald Trump wants to make me the new attorney general. You guys want to keep your jobs? I will decline Donald Trump's offer for me to become the attorney general if you guys send forward the letter." Huh? Sound good? They refused, thankfully. The next morning, on January 3rd, despite having uncovered no additional evidence of election fraud, co-conspirator 4 sent to a Justice Department colleague an edited version of his draft letter, draft letter to the states, which included a change from its previous claim that the Justice Department had concerns to a stronger false claim that as of today, there is evidence of significant irregularities that may have impacted the outcome of the election in multiple states, which again is a false claim. Also, in the morning of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 met with the defendant at the White House again without having informed senior Justice Department officials, and accepted the defendant's offer that he become acting attorney general. On the afternoon of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 spoke with Deputy White House counsel. The previous month, the Deputy White House counsel had informed Donald Trump that there is no option in which you do not leave the White House on January 20th. There is no reality in which you are like, you're done. You have lost. Now, the same Deputy White House counsel tried to dissuade co-conspirator 4 from assuming the role of acting attorney general. The Deputy White House counsel reiterated to co-conspirator 4 that there had been had not been outcome determinative fraud in the election, and that if the defendant remained in the office nonetheless, that there would be riots in every major city in the United States. Co-conspirator 4 replied, well, Deputy White House Counsel, they should try that in a small town. I'm kidding. He said, that's why there's an Insurrection Act. Oh, so you can use the power of the federal government to quell the protests and the riots that would have ensued afterwards for Trump staying in office, because that definitely would have happened. Also that afternoon, co-conspirator 4 met with the acting attorney general and told him that the defendant had decided to put co-conspirator 4 in charge of the Justice Department. An acting attorney general responded that he would not accept being fired by a subordinate and immediately scheduled a meeting with the defendant for that evening. On the evening of January 3rd, the defendant met for a briefing on an overseas national security issue with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and other national security advisors. The chairman briefed the defendant on the issue, which had previously arisen in December, as well as possible ways the defendant could handle it. When the chairman and other advisor recommended that the defendant take no action because Inauguration Day was only 17 days away, and of course, action could trigger something unhelpful, the defendant calmly agreed, saying, yeah, you're right. It's too late for us. We're going to give that to the next guy. The defendant moved immediately from this national security briefing to the meeting that the acting attorney general had requested earlier that day, which included co-conspirator 4 and acting attorney general, the acting attorney general, the Justice Department's attorney general for the office of the legal counsel of the attorney general, and the White House counsel, a deputy White House counsel, and a senior advisor. At the meeting, the defendant expressed frustration with the acting attorney general for failing to do anything to overturn the election results, and the group discussed co-conspirator 4's plans to investigate the purported election fraud to send his proposed letter to state officials, a copy of which was provided to the defendant during the briefing. The defendant, Donald Trump, relented in his plan to replace the acting attorney general with co-conspirator 4 only when he was told that it would result in a mass resignations at the Justice Department and his own White House counsel. So actively just trying to install, like, he was losing, even though his people voted for him and supported him, the ones that wanted to go forward with this completely illegal Tom Clancy plan that was just presided upon lies was thinning. So he was trying to install people that would stay with the plan, knowing it's lies, knowing none of it's true. The walls were closing in on people that were willing to do that and sell their soul. But he needed people there. At the meeting in the Oval Office on the night of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 suggested that the Justice Department should opine that the Vice President could exceed his lawful authority during the certification proceeding and change the election outcome. When the Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legal Counsel began to explain why the Justice Department should not do so, the defendant, Donald Trump, said, "No one here should be talking to the Vice President. I'm talking to the Vice President," and ended the discussion. The defendant's attempts to enlist the Vice President to fraudulently alter the election results at the January 6th certification proceeding. As the January 6th congressional certification proceeding approached and other efforts to impair, obstruct, and defeat the federal government function failed, the defendant sought to enlist the Vice President to use his ceremonial role at the certification to fraudulently alter the election results. The defendant did this first by using knowingly false claims of election fraud to convince the Vice President to accept the defendant's fraudulent electors, reject legitimate electoral votes, or send legitimate electoral votes to state legislatures for review rather than count them. When that failed, the defendant attempted to use a crowd of supporters that he had gathered in Washington, D.C. to pressure the Vice President, who is Mike Pence, to fraudulently alter the election results. They had gallows and everything out there for him. On December 19th, 2020, after cultivating widespread anger and resentment for weeks with his knowingly false claims of election fraud, the defendant urged his supporters to travel to Washington on the day of the certification proceeding, tweeting, Big protest in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Be there. It will be wild. Throughout late December, he repeatedly urged his supporters to come to Washington on January 6th. Oh dear. On December 23rd, the defendant retweeted a memo titled Operation Pence. Operation Pence Card, which falsely asserted that the vice president could, among other things, unilaterally disqualify legitimate electors from 6 targeted states. And I remember the news around that too. Tim Pool had pushed that one out. Tim Pool had pushed that lie out that the vice president has power to disqualify electors in states, and people were getting on that, and more of like the mainstream podcast conspiracy crowd started believing that. The plan. On the same day, co-conspirator 2 circulated a 2-page memo outlining a plan for vice president to unlawfully declare the defendant the certified winner of the presidential election. In the memorandum, co-conspirator 2 claimed that 7 states had transmitted 2 slates of electors and proposed that vice president announce that because of the ongoing disputes in the 7 states, there are no electors that can be deemed validly appointed in those states. So due to the fact that there's just some disputes, that Donald Trump's disputing the election in states, that the electors shouldn't be validly, so they were trying everything to get the Trump electors in those positions, if that makes sense, the whole time. And thank God they failed. Next, co-conspirator 2 proposed steps that he acknowledged violated the ECA, advocating that, in the end, Pence then gavels President Trump as re-elected. Just 2 months earlier, on October 11th, co-conspirator 2 had taken the opposite position, writing that neither the Constitution nor the ECA provided the vice president discretion in the counting of electoral votes or permitted him to make the determination on his own, which he doesn't. It's just ceremonial, hitting the gavel, counting the votes. He doesn't have any constitutional authority to make any determination on his own, stop the vote, any of that. It's all ceremonious, where the vice president's doing the counting. Beyond that, no power. On several private phone calls in late December and early January, the defendant repeatedly knowingly false claims of election fraud and directly pressured then Vice President Pence to use his ceremonial role at the certification proceeding on January 6 to fraudulently overturn the results of the election, and the vice president resisted, thankfully, including on December 25th, when the Vice President Pence called Donald Trump to wish him a Merry Christmas, the defendant quickly turned the conversation to January 6th, and his request that the Vice President reject the electoral votes that day. The Vice President, Mike Pence, pushed back, telling the defendant, Donald Trump, as the Vice President already had in previous conversations, I don't think I have the authority to change the outcome. That's what Mike Pence told Donald Trump. On December 29th, as reflected in the Vice President's contemporaneous notes, the defendant falsely told the Vice President that the Justice Department was finding major infractions. On January 1st, the defendant called Vice President and berated him because he had learned that the Vice President had opposed a lawsuit seeking a judicial decision that, at the certification, the Vice President had the authority to reject or return votes to the states under the Constitution. The Vice President responded that he thought there were no constitutional basis for such authority and that it was improper. In response, the defendant told the Vice President, "You're too honest." Within hours of the conversation, the defendant reminded his supporters to meet in Washington before the certification proceeding, tweeting, "The big protest rally in Washington, D.C. will take place at 11 o'clock in the morning on January 6th. Locational details to follow. #StopTheSteal." On January 3rd, the defendant again told the Vice President that at the certification proceeding, the Vice President had the absolute right to reject electoral votes and the ability to overturn the election. The Vice President responded that he had no such authority and that a federal appeals court had rejected the lawsuit making the claim the previous day. So everything that they've tried legally, every legal avenue was tried, and they lost every single one. Not a single one did they win. On January 3rd, co-conspirator 2 circulated a second memorandum that included a new plan under which, contrary to the ECA, the vice president would send the elector slates to the state legislatures to determine which slate to count. On January 4th, the defendant held a meeting with co-conspirator 2, the vice president, the vice president's chief of staff, and the vice president's counsel for the purpose of convincing the vice president, based on the defendant's knowingly false claims of election fraud, that the vice president should reject or send to the states Biden's legitimate electoral votes rather than count them. The defendant deliberately excluded his White House counsel from the meeting because the White House counsel previously had pushed back on Trump's false claims of election fraud. So one of his own, the White House counsel, couldn't attend the meeting because he had pushed back on Trump's plan. During the meeting, as reflected by Vice President's contemporaneous notes, the defendant made knowingly false claims of election fraud, including, bottom line, won every state by hundreds of thousands of votes, and we won every state, and asked regarding a claim his senior Justice Department officials previously had told him were false, including as recent as the night prior. What about the 205,000 votes more in Pennsylvania than voters? Oh, trolls are getting timed out. The cope is still happening? The cope is still happening, huh? Interesting. Anyways. At the meeting, the defendant expressed frustration with the acting attorney general for failing to do anything to overturn the election results, and the group discussed co-conspirator 4's plans to investigate the purported election fraud and to send his proposed letter to state officials, a copy of which was provided to the defendant during the meeting. The defendant relented in his plan to replace the acting attorney general with co-conspirator 4 only when he was told that it would result in mass resignations at the Justice Department and his own White House counsel. At the meeting in the Oval Office on the night of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 suggested that the Justice Department should opine and that the Vice President could exceed his lawful authority during the certification proceeding and change the election outcome. When the Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legal Counsel began to explain why the Justice Department should not do so, the defendant said, "No one here should be talking to the Vice President. I'm talking to the Vice President," and then ended the discussion. We're past that. We're past that part now. I got distracted by the trolls. Like the video if you guys haven't. Check in. We're going through the indictment. We got like 10 pages left. We're almost done. Okay, here we are. I found where we're at now. We're on page 34. 10 more pages left. All right, number 92. All right, let's continue. On January 4th, the defendant held a meeting with co-conspirator 2, the Vice President Chief of Staff, kept him out of the meeting. All right, we're actually on 93. During the meeting, as reflected with the Vice President's contemporaneous vote notes, the defendant knowingly made false... We read that already. I'm past that. Damn, I'm getting lost in the reading. It's a lot of reading. Damn, this is the most reading I've done in a long time. Tell you what, we're on this page now. All right. 94, that's the one we're on. Also on January 4th, with co-conspirator 2 acknowledged the defendant's senior advisor that no court would support his proposal, the senior advisor told co-conspirator 2, "You're going to cause riots in the streets," which was mentioned earlier in the indictment. Co-conspirator 2 responded that there had previously been points in the nation's history where violence was necessary to protect the republic. After that conversation, the senior advisor notified the defendant that co-conspirator 2 had conceded that his plan was not going to work. On the morning of January 5th, the defendant's direction, the Vice President's Chief of Staff and the Vice President's Counsel met again with co-conspirator number 2. Co-conspirator 2 now advocated for the Vice President to do what the defendant said he had preferred the day before: unilaterally reject electors from the targeted states. During his meeting, co-conspirator 2 privately acknowledged to the Vice President's counsel that he hoped to prevent judicial review of his proposal because he understood that it would be unanimously rejected by the Supreme Court. The Vice President's counsel expressed to co-conspirator 2 the following: through with the proposal would result in a disastrous situation where the election might have to be decided in the streets. That would be horrible. There would have been riots everywhere. The same day, the defendant encouraged supporters to travel to Washington on January 6th, and he set false expectations that the Vice President had the authority to and might use his ceremonial role at the certification proceeding to reverse the election outcome in the defendant's favor, including issuing the following tweets. At 11:06 a.m., Vice President has the power to reject fraudulently chosen electors. This was within 40 minutes of the defendant's earlier reminder of "see you in D.C." At 5:05 p.m., Washington is being inundated with people who don't want to see an election victory stolen. Our country has had enough. They won't take it anymore. We hear you and love you from the Oval Office. So he's just tweeting to try to rally support and get people to cause violence at the Capitol. He was doing that actively on Twitter. They'd be out there getting the tweets. Oh, this is what he said next. He loves us. Also on January 5th, the defendant met alone with the Vice President. When the Vice President refused to agree to the defendant's request that he obstruct the certification, the defendant grew frustrated and told the Vice President that the defendant would have to publicly criticize him. Upon learning this, the Vice President's Chief of Staff was concerned for the Vice President's safety and alerted to the head of the Vice President's Secret Service detail. As crowds began to gather in Washington and were audible from the Oval Office, the defendant remarked to advisors that the crowd the following day on January 6 was going to be angry. That night, the defendant, Donald Trump, approved and caused the defendant's campaign to issue a public statement that the defendant knew from his meeting with the Vice President only hours earlier was false. The Vice President and I are in total agreement that the Vice President has the power to act. So he lied on that too. He lied about everything. On January 6th, starting in the early morning hours, the defendant again turned to knowingly false statements aimed at pressuring the Vice President to fraudulently alter the election outcome, and raised publicly the false expectation that the Vice President might do so. At 1 a.m, the defendant issued a tweet that falsely claimed, "If Vice President Mike Pence comes through for us, we will win the presidency. Many states want to decertify the mistake they made in certifying incorrect and even fraudulent numbers in a process not approved by their state legislatures, which it must be. Mike can send it back." So this whole tweet he wrote, lie. The whole thing. No, Mike Pence can't do that. The Vice President does not have the power to do that. The states saying that they had fake numbers in the states, lie, 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 lie. At 8:17 a.m., the defendant issued a tweet that was falsely stated. States want to correct their votes, which they know were based on irregularities and fraud, plus corrupt process never received legislative approval. All Mike Pence has to do is send them back to the states, and we win. Do it, Mike. This is a time for extreme courage. Lying. Absolute lies. Mike Pence could do nothing about it. So all of this was trying to strong arm the Vice President. Yeah, nothing will happen to Trump. We'll see. We'll see. This is a moment in history. Vice President or a former president being indicted. Multiple indictments. This is just January 6th. You got other ones as well. On the morning of January 6th, an agent of the defendant contacted a United States senator to ask him to hand-deliver documents to the Vice President. The agent then facilitated the receipt by the senator's staff of the fraudulent certificates signed by the defendant's fraudulent electors in Michigan and Wisconsin, which were believed not to have been delivered to the Vice President or the archivist by mail. When one of the senator's staffers contacted a staffer for the Vice President by text message, to arrange for delivery of what the senator's staffer had been told were alternate slates of electors for Michigan and Wisconsin because the archivist didn't receive them. The vice president's staffer rejected them. At 11:15 in the morning, the defendant called the vice president and again pressured him to fraudulently reject or return Biden's legitimate electoral votes. The vice president again refused. Thankfully, Mike Pence did a good one there. Immediately after the call, the defendant decided to single out the vice president in public remarks he would make within the hour, reinserting language that he had personally drafted earlier that morning, falsely claiming that the vice president had authority to send electoral votes to the states, but that advisors had previously successfully advocated be removed. Earlier that morning, the defendant and selected co-conspirator 2 to join co-conspirator 1 in giving public remarks before his own. When they did so, based on knowingly false and election fraud claims, co-conspirator 1 and co-conspirator 2 intensified pressure on the vice president to fraudulently obstruct the certification proceeding. Co-conspirator 1 told the crowd, this is on January 6th, that the vice president could cast the ECA aside and unilaterally decide on the validity of these crooked ballots. He also lied when he claimed to have letters from 5 legislatures begging us to send elector slates to legislatures for review and called for trial by combat. That's how you know it's Rudy Giuliani. Trial by combat. Rudy. That's this whole thing. That's Eastman. He's got to be the co-conspirator number 2.
Over the next 10 days, we get to see the machines that are crooked, the ballots that are fraudulent, and if we're wrong, we will be made fools of. But if we're right, a lot of them will go to jail. So, let's have trial by combat. I'm willing to stake my reputation. The president is willing to stake his reputation on the fact that we're going to find criminality there. Is Joe Biden willing to stake his reputation that there's no crime there? No.
Is there any person here that actually thinks that Joe Biden won this election? I don't either, guys. I don't either. You know what? I went all across the country, everywhere I go. This guy couldn't fill up a classroom. And look at these crowds here. Look at these crowds here. He hides in his basement. No one buys it, guys. No one buys it. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They can lie. They can cheat. They can steal. My father has started a movement, and this movement will never, ever die. It will never die. This is a movement that will transcend him. It's a movement that will transcend all of us.
All right, we don't need to relive this horrible time. I just wanted to replay Rudy Giuliani's part, but then I had to use the bathroom. So, all right, we're back at it. We're back at it. So that was the trial by combat, all right, from Rudy Giuliani part in there. So that's definitely him. Co-conspirator 2 told the crowd, all we are demanding of Vice President Pence is this afternoon at 1 o'clock. He let the legislatures of the state look into this so we get to the bottom of it, and the American people know whether we have control of direction of our government. We no longer live in a self-governing republic if we can't get the answer to this question. The answer that they themselves created. All of this shit, none of it matters. Did any of you, all of you here that are MAGA Trump Republicans, do you believe that Joe Biden won? Of course, what a dumb question, right? It's all showman gamesmanship for these people. Like the crowd sizes and being a part of a cult, it sounds like, is like what they need. It's insane. All right, let's continue. We're getting there. Page 38 out of 45. Next, beginning at 11:56 a.m., the defendant made multiple knowingly false statements integral to his criminal plans to defeat the federal government function, obstruct certification, and interfere with others' right to vote and have their votes counted. The defendant repeated false claims of election fraud, gave false hope that the vice president might change the election outcome, and directed the crowd in front of him to go to the Capitol as means to obstruct the certification and pressure the vice president to fraudulently obstruct the certification. The defendant's knowingly false statements for these purposes included: the defendant falsely claimed that, based on fraud, the vice president could alter the outcome of the election results, stating, "I hope Mike is going to do the right thing. I hope so. I hope so. Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election. All he has to do, all this is from the number one, or certainly one of the top, constitutional lawyers in our country. He has the absolute right to do it. We're supposed to protect our country, support our Constitution, and protect our Constitution." Lie. That's just, he said that, but none of that's true. States want to revote. No, they don't. Not a single one did. The states got defrauded. No, they didn't. Not a single one did. They were given false information. They voted on it. Now they want to recertify. No, none of them did. They want it back. All Vice President Pence has to do is send it back to the states to recertify, and we become president, and you are the happiest people. We become president, huh? We become the president, and that's this whole thing, though. Everything that happens to Trump happens to them, or happens to MAGA. But it's not really an attack on me. It's an attack on you. Hey, they're really coming for y'all. I'm just in the way type bullshit, right? Just that's how you get people. It's cult mentality. That's how you get people in a cult. After the defendant falsely stated that the Pennsylvania legislature wanted to recertify their votes, they want to recertify, but the only way that can happen is if Mike Pence agrees to send it back. The crowd began to chant, "Send it back, send it back." Do they have that? January 6th, send it back, send it back. We could just replay the whole morning speech. Jeez, save America. Yeah, save America from these people, maybe. Alright, so the defendant also said that regular rules no longer applied, stating, "And fraud breaks up everything, doesn't it? When you catch somebody in a fraud, you're allowed to go by very different rules. Finally, after exhorting that we fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not gonna have a country anymore." I know that's a clip.
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
It was an hour-long speech filled with falsehoods and calls to action. "You'll never take back our country with weakness," President Trump told a fired-up crowd at his Save America rally, urging his thousands of followers to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue and fight like hell. Less than an hour later, the first violence at the Capitol. The siege lasts 3 hours, with at least 140 officers injured. 5 people, including Officer Brian Sicknick, would die in the riot or its aftermath. At 4:17 p.m., after what we now know was hours of pleading from aides and allies, the president posts a video telling his followers to go home.
But you have to go home now. We have to have peace.
When Congress reconvenes that night to certify the election results, things get heated, as nearly 150 Republicans still object to the counting of Pennsylvania's electoral votes. But it's not enough to overturn the results of the election. On January 7th, President Trump releases a new video acknowledging a new administration will be inaugurated.
A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th.
He does not attend said inauguration. 1 week after that, President Trump is impeached for a second time, this time for inciting a riot. Many of the 10 Republicans who voted to impeach face immediate backlash in their home states.
They lost their re-elections too because of it.
To rewrite the narrative about the Capitol riot spreads like wildfire. Later that month, the first of nearly 24 Oath Keepers are indicted for their alleged roles in planning the violence. Charges against more than 700 other individuals would follow.
Not guilty as charged.
February 13th, a majority of the Senate, including 7 Republicans, vote guilty on President Trump's impeachment charge, but they fall 10 votes shy of the 2/3 majority needed to convict. May 28th, a majority of senators, including 6 Republicans, vote to create an independent commission to investigate the Capitol attacks. But they fall 3 votes shy of the number they'd need to block a Republican filibuster. So instead, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi creates a select House committee to investigate. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy decides to boycott the committee and forego all of his Republican picks. Pelosi adds Republicans Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger on her own anyway. July 27th.
That's how Liz Cheney and the Republicans hate them now.
Committee's first hearing, we hear gripping testimony from officers who battled the mob that day and mental trauma ever since.
I was grabbed, beaten, tased, all while being called a traitor to my country. I was at risk of being stripped of and killed with my own firearm as I heard chants of kill him with his own gun. I could still hear those words in my head today.
I could feel myself losing oxygen and recall thinking to myself, this is how I'm going to die.
Deep. That's the officers on January 6th. Back to the indictment, right? Fight like hell, Donald Trump's statements. The defendant exploitation of the violence and chaos at the Capitol. Shortly before 1 p.m., the vice president issued a public statement explaining that his role as president of the Senate and the certification proceeding that was about to begin did not include the unilateral authority to determine which electoral votes could be counted and which should not. So basically all the bullshit they were saying that Mike Pence has the power to send the votes back, I do not have the power to do so. Before the defendant had finished speaking, a crowd began to gather at the Capitol. Thereafter, a mass of people, including individuals who had traveled to Washington and to the Capitol at the defendant's direction, broke through barriers cordoning off the Capitol grounds and advanced to the building, including by violently attacking law enforcement officers trying to secure it. The defendant, who had returned to the White House after concluding his remarks, watched the events at the Capitol unfold. Unfold on the television in the dining room next to the Oval Office. At 2:13 p.m., after more than an hour of steady, violent advancement, the crowd at the Capitol broke into the building. Upon receiving news that individuals had breached the Capitol, the defendant's advisors told him that there was a riot there and that rioters had breached the building. When advisors urged the defendant to issue a calming message aimed at the rioters, the defendant refused, instead repeatedly remarking that the people at the Capitol were angry because the election had been stolen. At 2:24 p.m., after advisors had left the defendant alone in his dining room, the defendant issued a tweet intended to further delay and obstruct the certification. Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth, Donald Trump tweeted. 1 minute later, at 2:25 p.m., the United States Secret Service was forced to evacuate the vice president's secure location. Yeah, no, it wasn't stolen. The election was not stolen at all. Donald Trump made that shit up. That's what this whole thing is trying to tell you. That all of the stolen election fraud, all of it was lies. None of it was true. There's nothing. You can do the what if it is true all you want, but you're doing that with yourself. And to make others have to debate this shit, and then also people legitimately believe it, is another thing. There's nothing fraudulent with this election. Biden won fair and square. Donald Trump is a shitty candidate that is not popular, but he's popular and he's got a strong base, got a good solid base of supporters still, and that's what it is, and they're loud. At 4:17 p.m., the defendant released a video message on Twitter that he had just taped in the White House Rose Garden. In it, the defendant repeated the knowingly false claim that we had an election that was stolen from us, and finally asked individuals to leave the Capitol while telling them that they were very special and that we love you. 6, that's this video, that's his Twitter video. You could probably still find that. That's gotta still be here. We love you, you're very special. Come back tomorrow. Basically. January 7th.
By addressing the heinous attack on the United States Capitol.
Where is January 6th? The go home. He deleted the go home video? He deleted the go home video on Twitter.
I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
So he sent his own people out there and then said that their actions that he had sent them to do is just going to help. I mean, yeah, common sense, but it's like, why even? And the other thing too that's hilarious is they can't even gather anymore. They can't even do events because anyone there they accuse as being a Fed. They think that the Feds have infiltrated their whole thing now. Just full on Tom Clancy mode, full on Tom Clancy cult. It's going to be interesting because there'll be a big support for other Republican candidates, and I can definitely see some infighting, some WWE moments going on in the stream when it comes to voting time. Because I mean, MAGA is going to have their MAGA thing, they're going to have their flags and their trucks and MAGA this, MAGA that, but there'll be other Republicans too voting for other candidates, and it's going to be like a WWE episode. It's going to be great. All right, let's continue. So that's the go home, your special video. At 6:01 p.m., the defendant tweeted, "These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long." Whatever, bro. Dude, it's the same strategy as the Soviet people. The same bullshit, the same like the fucking Russians in the East. It's the same exact propaganda strategy. The Russians, the poor Russian speakers in the East, blah blah. Like it's the same fucking thing. The poor patriots that have been unfairly treated. Whatever, dude. Whatever, dude. My fucking ass. Go home in love and peace. Remember this day forever. On the evening of January 6th, the defendant and co-conspirator attempted to exploit the violence and chaos at the Capitol by calling lawmakers to convince them, based on knowingly false claims of election fraud, to delay the certification, including the defendant, through the White House aides, attempted to reach 2 United States senators at 6 p.m. From 6:59 p.m. until 7:18 p.m., co-conspirator 1 placed calls to 5 United States senators and 1 United States representative. Co-conspirator 6 attempted to confirm phone numbers for 6 United States senators whom the defendant had directed co-conspirator 1 to call and attempt to enlist in further delaying the certification. So I bet you like Ted Cruz is going to be on that list, you know, definitely. Maybe Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham has a spine when he wants it. In one of the calls, co-conspirator 1 left a voicemail intended for a United States senator that said, "We need you, our Republican friends, to try to just slow it down so we can get these legislatures to get more information to you. And I know they're reconvening at the 8 tonight, but only strategy we can follow is to object to numerous states and raise issues so that we get ourselves into tomorrow, ideally until the end of tomorrow." So now they're trying to get the senators to stop the vote. So they've done everything. They've tried influencing the states, putting fake electors in positions, fake certification process to legitimize the fake electors, strong-arming the vice president, trying to strong-arming the individual electors, the legitimate ones, trying to lie to senators, or also try to get senators to go along with this plan. In another message intended for the United States Senator, co-conspirator 1 repeatedly knowingly said false allegations of election fraud, including that the vote counts certified by the United States to Congress were incorrect, and that the governors who had certified knew they were incorrect, that illegal immigrants had voted in substantial numbers in Arizona, and that Georgia gave you a number in which 65,000 people who were underage had voted. Co-conspirator 1, who's Rudy Giuliani, is just the majority of all this, also claimed that the vice president's actions had been surprising and asked the senator to object to every state and kind of spread this out a little bit like a filibuster. Sorry, just hold on. This is Rudy Giuliani. All right, there it was.
Nice to meet you, my dear.
Nice to meet you. You're one of my greatest heroes.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. Thank you.
I will try my best, but because I'm super excited and nervous.
Well, you relax. I'll relax. You want me to ask you questions? I'll relax you, okay?
Yes, thank you. I feel like I'm living in a fairy tale.
Sure. You're gonna do great. Okay.
So, please take this. It used to belong to my father, but I think you should keep it.
Oh my God, that's wonderful that you gave this to me. So, well, thank you, my dear.
A little bit about China. As an expert of national security, what do you think we can do going forward to prevent this from happening again?
Well, China manufactured the virus and let it out. And they deliberately spread it all around the world. I don't think anybody was eating bats.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a bat?
Oh, no. I don't think I will ever to eat a bat. If you eat a bat with me.
Okay, I will. I'll eat a bat with you.
You're so funny. So, probably in a rough estimate, how many lives President Trump saves?
I'd say he saved 1 million lives. It would have been 1 million more had he
saved 1 million lives.
The way the Democrats would have done.
Yeah.
But he acted swiftly. He acted before anybody. In fact, even his own advisors, some of them advised him not to do it.
Yeah.
But he still does it anyways.
I'm good. You're a little bit. This is good. There you go.
Yeah, it's always.
You're doing very well. You gotta look pretty.
Sorry to interrupt, Mayor. Sound problem. I think we cancel interview.
I don't think we need. Because I've already checked.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, that's a bit better. Let me just listen in for a bit. Yeah. Is she asking too many questions?
No, she's doing great.
She's like a very nagging wife.
Like a nagging wife.
If I were you, I would stick to marrying your cousins.
Let me check the sound. Can I check the sound?
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, can you say something? Can you say something?
Yes, I'm fine.
Yeah, the sound is perfect.
It's probably better if I stay in.
No, please. If I need you, I will call you.
Sure.
You will be in the lobby, right? I'm so sorry. That's
Relax,
horrible.
Sit. Okay.
I'm so sorry for that. Really apologize.
Apology accepted. No problem.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah. Thank you again for giving me this time. Shall we have a drink in the bedroom?
Oh. Uh-oh. Into the bedroom they go.
What happened?
Remember when he said that this was his microphone? I was adjusting my microphone.
And your address.
Oh.
Should we slip your jacket?
Oh.
Put down your crumb. She's 15. She's too old for you. She's my daughter. Please, take me instead. Take my anus. No, take my anus. Do not touch her.
I'm better than him.
No, I better. My back pussy very tight.
No, please, my front anus.
Please, I will let you enjoy that. No, I better.
I would love to.
She's 15. She's too old for you. I'm dead. Oh my god, Borat, just dude, so funny, so good. So that's conspirator number 1 for you guys in the indictment here. That was an actual scene in Borat 2, and that is actually Rudy Giuliani in that. So I don't know what they did to do that, but they got him in the movie, and it's awesome. All right, we're almost there. Page 42 out of 45. At 7:01 p.m., while co-conspirator 1 was calling United States senators, who again was Rudy Giuliani, this guy right here, Rudy from Borat, okay, was calling United States senators on behalf of the defendant. The White House counsel called the defendant to ask him to withdraw any objections to allow the certification. The defendant refused. The attack on the Capitol obstructed and delayed the certification for approximately 6 hours, until the Senate and House of Representatives came back into session separately at 8:06 p.m. and 9:02 p.m. respectively, and came together at a joint session at 11:35 p.m. At 11:44 p.m., co-conspirator 2 emailed the Vice President's counsel advocating that the Vice President violate the law and seek further delay of the certification. Co-conspirator 2 wrote, "I implore you to consider one more relatively minor violation and adjourn for 10 days to allow the legislatures to finish their investigations, as well as allow a full forensic audit of the massive amount of illegal activity that has occurred here." At 3:41 a.m. on January 7th, the President of the Senate, the Vice President, announced the certified results of the 2020 presidential election in favor of Joe Biden. The defendant, who's Donald Trump, and his co-conspirators committed one or more of the acts to affect the object of the conspiracy alleged in paragraphs 13. All these, we just went through all of them, right? 13, 15 through 16, 18 through 20. Okay, all of that we've already gone through. Damn. Count 2. Conspiracy to obstruct an official. So that was all for count 1, huh? All of that? Damn, dude. Nearly, that was like 42 pages for count 1. That's a lot, dude. Count 1 is pretty heavy, right? Yeah, that was all count 1. The conspiracy to defraud the United States. 40, yeah, nearly 39 pages for count 1. Help. Okay, well, we got through that part. Count 2 isn't as many. Where's count 2? So there we go. Count 2. Conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding now. The allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 4 and 8 through 123 of this indictment are re-alleged and fully incorporate here by reference. From on or about November 14th, 2020 through on or about January 7th in the District of Columbia and elsewhere, the defendant, Donald J. Trump, did knowingly combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with co-conspirators known and unknown to the grand jury to corruptly obstruct and impede an official proceeding, that is, the certification of the electoral vote, in violation of Title 18 United States Code Section 1512 subsection C2, in violation of Title 18 United States Code subsection 152 kilo. Count 3, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding. The allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 4 and 8 through 123 of this indictment are re-alleged and fully incorporated here by reference. From on or about November 14th of 2020 through on or about January 7th of 2021 in the District of Columbia, elsewhere, the defendant, Donald J. Trump, attempted to and did corruptly obstruct and impede an official proceeding, that is, the certification of the electoral vote. Count 4, conspiracy against rights. Damn, dude, count 1 is the long read. Count 2, 3, and 4 are quick. They just reference what they put in count 1. The allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 4 and 8 through 123 of this indictment are re-alleged and fully incorporated here by reference. From on or about November 14th of 2020. So Mr. Sports in the chat continues to cope. He says that's just an opinion. He objected to the... No, he did not object to the results, Mr. Sports, that you keep coping and I keep seeing your comments. and the other 2-3 other people. He did not just, so what they're trying to say is, oh, he just simply objected the results. No, he did not. He lied about the results. You can't just object to it. You can privately and cry and complain about it privately, but he did not just do that. He took it a step further and a step further and a step further by trying to instill false electors in positions to overturn the election back to Donald Trump. All of the election fraud and election claims and this and that, and was all the Donald Trump campaign and Trump's people and Trump's little inner circle to try to overturn the legitimate election, which is Biden who won, and try to overturn that into Donald Trump. So it's not just fucking, oh, it's just a matter of Donald Trump's freedom of speech and his opinion. Kiss my ass, lick the, I can't even say that. I don't want to say that, but kiss my ass. Because he did not just simply disagree with the results. He went and did a whole conspiracy nonsense, sent people to the Capitol to overturn the election violently, right? Lied to his base, still grifts off them to this day. Tried to establish a whole swamp full of people that are gonna tried to illegally keep him as president, and went above and beyond to do so. And the evidence is there. So if you want to sit there and go, oh, well, it's just a matter of an opinion, well, that's your fucking fault. And you're going to see Donald Trump indicted, and he's going to go to prison, and there's nothing you can do about it. And he's not going to win the next election either. And you're just going to sit there and you're going to go on with your life. And you can cry about it, cope and seethe about it, but that's about it. He's going to face accountability. He's going to be facing this. These indictments are legitimate. Everything that has been accused of him, everything that he is legitimate in terms of his lies, his deceit, his grift, the fascist following that he's built that just have no tolerance for anything other than Donald Trump. The sickening cult that is transpired from this is sad. And if it didn't come down to the individuals in the states that rejected this plan, that Donald Trump wanted to overturn the legitimate election of Biden winning and do fake electors and basically do exactly what Russia does in Ukraine and other places to annex territory and do sham bullshit, sham fraudulent fake bullshit, dude, just complete and utter un-American garbage. I don't know if the Russians gave Trump and MAGA people this mindset or if it's always been around. I'm too young still. I'm only 30 years old, so I don't know how deep this Soviet type of mindset in the United States goes, this bullshit. And it's sad that it's coming from conservatives, right? You'd think it would be liberals or like if communists of the olden days. That always gets put in the conservative media of liberals, and communists are the actual evil. And it's just, communism's evil. Communism is not worked in the world, but fascism is alive and well in the world, and it's got a place in governments. Donald Trump's base is, and it is what it is, bunch of fascist fucking people. There's some individuals that are MAGA that are probably decent human beings that are just caught up in it, and they're caught up in the cult mindset still, and like I mentioned, their friends and their family are all MAGA, so they really have no way out, whatever cope reason it is. But at this point, at this time, knowing the traitorous actions of Donald Trump while he was president and while he's no longer president, and he's still repeating these lies and hasn't done anything to try to remedy them or even come together to his own base, like, hey y'all, hey, we lost, okay, we lost, I lied, my bad, but I know you guys still support me anyways, even though I lied, because it's true that MAGA still will support him. They still will vote for him, even though he lied and he cheated, and he's gonna likely go to prison. They'll still vote for him. So even if he was like, hey, I lied, we lost, but let's go get him again in 2024, that would be more honorable, and he'd have the right to do that. I mean, he'd have to face accountability for his lies, which he's doing right now. But I mean, at least then, I mean, you'd have a whole arc of him, okay, we actually lost, y'all. But honestly, running again and going through this whole process again without saying it, without admitting to losing, I mean, his whole re-election is an admittance to losing. So, I mean, you can play these games and not use words or phrases when they're supposed to, and say that, hey, we lost the election. Hey, no, there's election fraud. No, you know that we never lost the 2020 election. No, and there's no evidence or anything to back it up. It's nothing but words. It's not a matter of an opinion. It's literal lies, unsubstantiated lies that have no merit to them whatsoever for the sake of people to just talk about it. Just talking, it's just a matter of and then what they'll do is when they're just proven, they'll cry about, oh well, my opinion's being censored. Because after a certain amount of time, it's like having that opinion just exist, even though it's complete and utter unsubstantiated lies. Having that and still trying to treat it as if it's a legitimate talking point, it's gonna get blocked and banned. Like your words about Donald Trump winning, or you're trying to cope about the whole fact that he lost. No, people don't want to see that. People don't want to see the lies continue, so it's gonna be removed or terminated. It's not a matter of free speech. It's a social media platform. It's a YouTube channel. My chat on YouTube. The government, Donald Trump, who was the president of the United States, was openly trying to suppress freedom of speech and attack people for working and doing the electoral process and go and send his supporters at people, undermine the Constitution completely, have co-conspirators in the Justice Department try to flip senators to lie based upon, like, he is the swamp. Donald Trump and MAGA is the very swamp that they set out to go and drain from the whole start of this. Like, we're going to drain the swamp. We're going to be this alternate, this and I get it, and that's why I voted for him in 2016, because he was an alternate candidate to, like, the Clintons. Because what the fuck, who would want honestly, Hillary Clinton was a horrible fucking candidate. Horrible candidate. Who would want another Clinton as the fucking president, dude? Are you kidding me? So, but in our efforts to try to get a non-Clinton, like, establishment politician, someone that is the swamp, we elected someone that brought their own swamp, and it's Donald Trump. So you didn't drain a swamp. There is still yucky government people in positions that have power, but no greater example of an abuse of power than Donald Trump and the MAGA crowd of what they want to see. Because unfortunately, their people still want to see Donald Trump become president and win, which is just sad. What do you guys got? Let me leave a couple comments. We still have to do a war news stream tonight, but I have to set that up quick. Let me get that thing scheduled. What are your guys' comments? What do you guys say about Donald Trump? Let's look at our poll. Oh wow, almost 1,800 votes. Do you agree with the charges against Donald Trump? 82%. 82%. Trump can't be bought. Yes, he can. Yes, he what do you mean? He sells out. He sells out. What do you mean? Everything. Just he was the mastermind behind by Live Golf and the PGA morphing that real fans of, for example, it's just the recent memory one. Getting the Saudis and Saudi deals. That's un-American as fuck. Saudi Arabia is not an ally to America, especially with how much we want oil and shit. Saudi Arabia is like a resource enemy, not to mention their human rights violations that are just egregious. But Donald Trump and his family have sold us out to Saudi Arabia. You don't think that's happening? What else you guys got? Yeah, exactly. What else do you guys got? I mean, that's just basic. I knew that shit when I was a Republican. I knew that was going on. What else you got? I'm just getting the war stream set up quick. I'm probably gonna go. I'm gonna have a bite of a sandwich too because I'm hungry. Let me pull this up here. What do we got? I got to make a thumbnail. I'm reading comments at the same time. Yeah, literally. And if you support Ukraine, you can't. Supporting Trump and supporting Ukraine don't go hand in hand. I'm sorry, they don't. They just do not. He strong-armed Ukraine, withheld aid for dirt and blackmail, has this magical 24-hour peace plan that he'll never share because it's like whatever, just so stupid. I'm getting the war stream set up. And I would just run it. I would just go right now with it and just make this one giant stream. But people watch the war stream on its own. And they watch it like in the morning. People that are asleep right now. Oh, this is going to be an ugly. Maybe one day when I have a big enough platform, I can just do one long stream for the whole day. Like some big streamers do. They're live for like 8-10 hours a day. But we're gonna have to do it in separate streams for now. Any questions? Thank you for reading all that. Yeah, we made it to the end of the indictment. So if you're wondering what you're watching, we just finished reading Trump's new indictment from January 6th and his role as the mastermind behind all of it, behind the election fraud lies, stating that the election was stolen, stop the steal was all bullshit. And if you fell for it, I'm sorry, but you fell for some shit. Do you think RFK Jr. will buy? He won't need to buy MAGA voters. He's already getting them. The Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to split the MAGA vote. It's already happening among the conspiracy brain. The conspiracy brains. Okay, it is 5:24. Okay. Gonna do just a general thumbnail today. I don't just a photo of Ukraine. Do you know if there's any outcome here that can stop Trump from becoming or running for president? I mean, I don't know the ins and outs. I just know that he can run from jail. He can run from jail, but I don't know. That's a good question though. We need to ask someone that knows a little bit more, probably Rubia. Rubia Garcia. You guys watch Rubia? She's the homie. Here, this is what I'm doing. I'm getting the thumbnail ready, but I'm also reading comments, so keep sending comments in. We just finished the indictment. It was a read. The count one is the majority of it, of the conspiracy to defraud the United States. He's toast. He deserves it though. It's no force, it's no deep state cabal that's after him. That's all just buzzwords for his base. It's all just buzzwords for the MAGA base. None of that shit is happening. It's a result of his own actions. I'll go through some of the super chats too. Let me use just a basic one. Welcome to the channel. Welcome, welcome. USC 18, yeah, United States Code 18. You can look that up. That was referenced often. And then the rest of the counts reference count one for some of the paragraphs that were in there. Okay. Russia L. There wasn't a whole lot of Ukraine news today. Honestly, the biggest news now is what we just covered today. I have to reopen all of this. Something basic. Oops. The hell was even that? RFK, it's family against his candidacy. Oh yeah, no one. Yeah, of course, he's a conspiracy theorist, and could be. People need to look into his connections, his money connections, and see if he's got anything with Russia. Jake Bro did a good video on RFK Jr. and his BS. It's just easier to build this now and send all of you guys to the war news, because I can, like, you know how I usually redirect. Oh, I'll do it again at the end of the war news to Snack Squad. Well, I can send you guys to this stream on Mercado Media. It's just gonna be pretty simple. Ukraine fights on. There wasn't a whole lot of changes today. All right. Let me get this thing scheduled, and then I'll send you guys on into it here. We also had a discussion with Alex earlier today. All right. All right, let me read some of the super I got this. Hold on. No, August 1st. August 1st, 2023. Change this. Okay. I'm hoping that we get some big Ukraine war news soon. Another liberation would be good. All right, it's Tuesday today, right? So those that tuned in yesterday, my Monday streams, Mondays are member appreciation days, so that's why the chat was set to member only, but it'll be normal tonight. Okay. I'm setting it for 8:15, but give me like until 8:20ish, which is 9:15 Eastern, 9:20, because I'm gonna eat some of my sandwich, and I need more than 5. Give me like 10 minutes, but I set it for 9:15. All right, some of the fan funding and some of the super chats here at the end from the Donald Trump indictment reading stream. I gotta reopen all this shit. Some super chats. All right, it's scheduled, so you should be able to find it here. Okay. All right, so going back to the beginning. So Maddie gifted a Mercado Media membership. Thank you. Astro, Dark Brandon, Rises, PJ. Commander 401 says, if I had taken any blueprints from work when I worked as a machinist for defense contractor, would have been sent to prison and still be there. Trump is evil. Yeah. In the U.S. Army, a lot of dudes plugged in their phones into the military map. We have like, it's called an MTS system or a Blue Force tracker. They literally, because it had a USB charger on there, soldiers would plug their like iPhone cord in just to charge their phone on a mission. And I saw soldiers lose rank for that, like completely, and got kicked out. 420 day, Trump is a traitor. Yes, he is. Say what you will, but Trump is only running to pardon himself because he knows he is guilty. Well, he's running for the power too. Yeah, he'd pardon himself, but he's running for the power. Courtney Scott, member for 2 months. Happy 420 day. Kimberly says, lock him up. Call Me C says, thanks for all you do. Thank you, Call Me C. Immortal Badass is Operator Starsky 2024. Mocha Meadow says, the days Trump sat with Putin on and Kim Jong-un without anyone in a room should have woke people up. Yeah, it didn't though. Ozzy T5 gifted because he was trying to sell it as, look, we're going to be friends with our biggest enemies, not ignoring the whole fact of why they're our biggest enemies, but he was just trying to do that shit. John, $5 super chat. Haha, Trumpy dumpster indicted for fraud from Ann. Mick Dundee says, even now the MAGA will still insist it's fake news that Trump was robbed. Slava Ukraine. What's up, Mick? How you doing? Depleted Ukrainian Cowboy says, yes. Who is who in the Trump indictment? Great fun. Trump indicted that mob without a doubt. Yes, he did. Or incited, rather. Absolutely. Karen Thompson, $20 super chat. Jiu-jitsu is life. He's a con man, fraud, and a Russian asset. Thanks for covering. Thank you so much. Jiu-jitsu is life. I can't believe I'm 27 years older than Mr. Mercado. Well done, young man. I feel old. I'm 30 years old, but I'm feeling older than that. Dear remaining mega folks from Stroopy Noopers, please form a support group now because I really do not want to witness your come to Jesus moments. Start your own internal support groups. Abe, welcome to level 1. I thanked Carney Fexer a lot earlier with the big $200 super chat. Thank you so much for that. I am aware of every single aspect of all 7 failed attempts within this coup. I know there is one. I want to see the tie to Russia's involvement. First time donation. Thank you so much from Texas, Dallas. Popeye 6-month membership. News is not just favorable news. Thanks, Merc. Absolutely. I have a lot of people that don't understand that. I mean, I know we cover Ukraine, but on Mercado Media, I've always covered domestic U.S. topics. That's how we started. I'm not going to give up on Ukraine, obviously, and stop the Ukraine news. But if you're new to Mercado Media since the Ukraine and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, like, I started covering U.S. news. I'm not going to stop. So get used to it, I guess. If you don't, you get over it. Thank God Pence had courage to do the right thing, of course. Tashi, members for 7 months. Rudy from Borat, dead. London Water, a simple connection from Maine. Thank you so much. Rob Zombies, thank you for reading all of that, of course. And Commander 401 says, I love the fact that they sent a war crimes prosecutor from The Hague after Donald Trump. It's beautiful, exactly. They don't know how, you know, Jack Smith is a savage. He's going to get it done. He's the guy when you want a conviction and you want to see someone powerful held accountable. Jack Smith is the one to do it. So, all right, you guys, war news coming up here. Give me like 5 minutes, and then we'll just probably shoot from the hip, honestly, for the war news. It probably would be like an hour stream anyways. Not really a whole lot of changes in the map or anything like that, but we'll still do a full rundown. I have it scheduled already. I'll post the link to the stream in the chat right here, but it's already set up and ready to go. So we'll get started over there. Give me like 5-10 minutes. I'm going to quickly have some of my sandwich, and then we'll go through all the Ukraine news and videos of the day. So that's been the reporting here from the Donald Trump indictment. You can rewind at your leisure. This stream will post, so you can rewatch it all. Jack Smith did a press conference, and then after that, it's just been nothing but the indictment for over 3 hours, damn near. About 3-hour indictment reading. That was intense. So everyone else, I'll see you guys on the Ukraine war news stream. And if you don't know what that is, just go back to our Ukraine chat. Same with Facebook. There will be a new stream on Facebook as well. Just wait for it to pop up 5-10 minutes from now. I'll see you guys.